Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto x Black Clover Harem. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. In the remote village of Hage of the Forsaken Lands stood a small church. This church wasn't particularly special except for the large skull that sat watching over it. Otherwise it was a nondescript church with nothing special about it. Except for the fact that 3 baskets sat on the doorstep. Now what were in these baskets, you might ask? 3 babies with just one of them crying. Hearing the commotion, the father of the church opened the door looking down at the 3 children. "Well, what do we have here?" he asked, looking around before sighing. "Well, it looks like you 3 were orphaned by this world. Are you related at all?" he asked as he picked up 2 of them, bringing them inside quickly before returning for the 3rd one. "It doesn't seem like you 3 are," he said as he looked at the 3 male babies. One had black hair and amber eyes. One had white hair with green eyes, and the last one had blonde, almost yellow hair and blue eyes. Taking a closer look, he noticed names written on the onesies each of them wore. Asta, Yuno and Naruto?" he said, Asta being the one with white hair. Yuno had black hair and Naruto had the blonde hair. Looking closer, the father received a kick to the face courtesy of Asta, causing the man to stumble backwards holding his now bleeding nose. "That's quite the strength you have there," he said, simply laughing as Naruto looked at him intently before he let out a giggle, causing the man to smile. "Looks like I'll have my hands full with you 3, he said with a small sigh before he smiled happily. 15 years later in Hage Village. "Sister, please marry me," came a loud shout that filled the valley that Hage Village sat in. Naruto paused in his work, looking behind him to see Asta holding a flower up to a girl in a nun uniform before shaking his head. "I apologize, Asta-kun, but I can't marry you," the sister said with a smile. This was Sister Lily, a girl that had come to the church to help Father Orsi raise the influx of orphans that had come to it. Naruto sighed and simply shook his head as a red hue covered the clothes as they began to dry. The boys had grown for sure, though Asta was rather short in comparison, with Naruto and Yuno standing at about the same height now. Naruto wore black pants and a burnt orange long-sleeve collared shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The shirt had a black collar which he wore flared. His sun-kissed hair went to the middle of his neck and was rather wild with spikes going in every direction. Asta was of short stature with an exceptionally muscular build. He has green eyes and messy, ash-blonde hair with bangs in front of his forehead and a single strand protruding upwards from the center of his head. He keeps his hair together with a black headband. His outfit consists of a plain white tunic with a V-shaped collar underneath a dark blue jacket whose sleeves extend only up to his elbows. He sports a pair of matching shorts which have stitch marks on the left side. His pants also extend just below his knees. His shoes are made out of 2 different cloths, the parts covering his ankles, the soles the same color as his jacket and pants. The parts covering his toes are white, a vertical stitch mark going from the bridge to his toes. Yuno is a young man of average height with a lean build, amber eyes, and messy black hair. His outfit consists of a pitch black shirt with a high collar and long sleeves. The sleeves have brown leather that cover the wrists and upper arms. He wears light brown pants that are cut below his knees and, around his waist, a pair of brown belts that cross each other. Additionally, he wears a pair of dark-colored socks and a pair of boots. "Looks like Asta is back to his old habits this morning, ne Yuno?" Naruto said as he folded the clothes, setting them in a basket. Asta didn't seem to take no for an answer before Sister Lily had enough, slamming the young teen into the ground with a fist of water on accident. "Asta, that's enough," Yuno finally spoke up in a monotone voice, glaring at the teen. Asta returned the glare as he grit his teeth. "Just because you can use magic it makes you feel so special? Well, I'm going to become the Wizard King," Asta shouted as he ran to help with the clothes only to see them already done. Turning on his heel, the boy ran towards the front of the house to chop some wood, only for Yuno to already have the wood chopped up. "Face it, Asta, I'm just better than you," Yuno said nonchalant as he set the wood down. "Why do you always butt into my business?" Asta shouted as Yuno shrugged. "Because I find you annoying," he replied as Naruto sighed. "We get it. Lovebirds just kiss and make up already," Naruto teased as he shot a small burst of fire into the small stove which Sister Lily used to cook. "Just you watch, Naruto. You know I'm going to get the greatest grimoire there is and become the Wizard King," He shouted, causing everyone but Naruto and Lily to laugh. Maybe when you do get your grimoire you'll be able to use magic. Lily thought aloud, causing stars to form in Asta's eyes as he thought about all the cool magic he might be able to use. Don't get too into yourself just yet, Asta. There are still a few months until we even get our grimoires. Naruto told the boy who grinned at the teen, nodding. In the meantime, I'm going to train my body so I'm ready. He shouted before running off, causing the teen to grin and shake his head at the boy's antics. Naruto, do you really think Asta can become a magic knight, let alone the Wizard King? A young boy with brown hair and purple eyes asked. This was Nash, one of the foster brothers that Naruto had at the church. Naruto looked at the young kid before looking back at Asta as he ran off, a large grin growing on his face. Well, of course I do, otherwise he wouldn't be worthy of the title of mine and Yuno's rivals. He said, kneeling down in front of the young boy, rubbing his hair affectionately. Just you watch, Nash. Me, Asta and Yuno will work hard to become magic knights. He said as Nash huffed, looking away deep in thought. The few months between then and the grimoire acceptance ceremony passed quickly as the three teens prepared themselves to receive their own grimoires. All the 15-year-olds in the area converged on the tower, which held many grimoires, all of which Asta looked at in awe. Naruto simply looked around the tower, eyeing the many books as Yuno looked impassive. Welcome all of those who have come for your grimoires. I wish you the best of luck and hope one day one of you shall become the Wizard King. A voice called out as a man wearing old wizard robes flew down on a carpet, landing before the assembled crowd. No, seriously. Please, one of you become the Wizard King. No one from this area has achieved anything of note. Pleaded the man before he coughed into his hand. And with that, I congratulate you all on the grimoires that have chosen you. He said as a bright light flashed from all the books before they began to float down towards the gathered group. Here's come my really cool grimoire. Asta shouted, striking a pose as he waited for his book to come towards him. Everyone in the room received theirs, with each grimoire varying in shape and size as well as the cover of the book. However, for the boy a grimoire never came, causing his smile to fall into a frown. With everyone celebrating, the orphans watched the boy's hopes start to be dashed before his very eyes. Naruto also looked to the boy with a deep frown forming for his friend and rival. Looking at Yuno, he noticed a look of concern for the boy they had grown up with. However, two bright flashes distracted the two as rays of gold and red clashed together as two grimoires fell down towards the teens. For Yuno, his was gold with a 4-leaf clover which landed in his outstretched hand. The biggest shock to everyone was that it had a 4-leaf clover. Naruto's own grimoire had a red cover and everyone eyed it intently before growing shocked at seeing another 4-leaf clover on the cover. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly, however, as he noticed what looked to be a second cover within his grimoire. Opening the book, the pages flipped before they suddenly stopped on the inner cover, which was a dark black with a red 4-leaf clover. Frowning, Naruto noticed a bright red script run over the cover before turning into a dark black as Naruto stopped attempting to flip past it. Naruto turned to the first spells in the book, which caused the boy to be shocked himself as he read Hellfire Magic. Closing the book, the master of the tower just as shocked as everyone regained his composure, coughing into his hand. That concludes this year's ceremony. We look forward to what you all, he started before he stopped as Asta spoke up. Excuse me, but I haven't received my grimoire yet. He spoke up, still the goofy position. However, all joy was lost from the boy as shock and horror overtook him. I see. I'll come back next year maybe? He said, confused on the situation. Haha, look at him, unable to gain a grimoire, what a weakling. A hushed voice said in the crowd, which began a torrent of mocking. Yuno, Naruto, I will become strong and become the Wizard King. He suddenly shouted, causing the hall to quiet down before breaking out into laughter. You two are my rivals. He shouted as the laughing grew louder. Asta simply gritted his teeth before turning on his heel and ran out the hall. Asta, Naruto began, however a hand landed on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Yuno, who simply shook his head. Sighing, Naruto noticed a shady-looking figure watch the two intently, however he brushed it off as the nature of their grimoires. Once the ceremony ended, Naruto and Yuno walked out of the hall together, wishing to return to the church. However, two richer-looking teens stood ahead of the two. Naruto and Yuno? Asked the clear leader of the pair. I believe those grimoires belong to us, not some mere orphans. He continued, holding his outstretched hand. Naruto and Yuno looked at each other before Naruto laughed. What's with the hand? You think we're just going to hand over our grimoires? He asked as the team glared at him. Well, obviously we are royalty after all. He bluffed, causing Naruto to laugh even more as his magic grabbed a hold of his grimoire. The pages began to turn. That's quite enough, young man. A voice said as chains could be heard, and quicker than anyone could comprehend slapped the two would-be thieves into one of the walls. Turning to their helper, Naruto assumed he saw the same shady man who had a lean build, messy and wavy long black hair, and a burn mark on the left-hand side of his face. He wore a black full bodysuit with a pair of belts. He also carries a pouch strapped around his right thigh. His boots are black with a pair of belts that hold each of them together. Additionally, he covers his attire with a dark red cloak buttoned together around his right shoulder. Thank you, Naruto said. Suddenly chains suddenly wrapped around the two, squeezing tightly. Thank you actually, as I will be taking your grimoires. After all, they're worth a fortune on the black market, he said with a sinister grin as he picked up the two grimoires. Out of the fry and into the frying pan, Yuno? Naruto asked his friend, who sighed. It would appear so, Naruto, he said with a monotone voice, seemingly unfazed. Hey! The voice of Yuno came as he flew out of the forest, crashing into the wall as he fell on his face. Asta, Naruto said, concerned for his friend. However, the team quickly hopped on his feet, pointing at the mage attacking them. Give them their grimoires back, he shouted, causing the man to laugh as a chain moved quickly, smacking the teen into a wall with an audible bang. Asta, Yuno and Naruto both shouted with concern. The man started to laugh more as he looked at the boy. No wonder you didn't get a grimoire. You see, little boy, my chains have the ability to sense how much mana and magic ability someone has within them, and when my chains hit you, they sensed nothing. I don't even know how you're alive. What a loser, even from birth, he shouted as he continued to laugh as he walked over to Asta, stomping on the boy, rubbing his heel into the teen's shoulder. Naruto gritted his teeth as he felt the rage bubble within him. Kill him, a voice within the teen said simply as Naruto's eyes flashed red. However, he was snapped out of this when he heard Yuno shout. Asta, you are my rival. You can become strong. Me and Naruto know this, he shouted, causing Asta's eyes to shoot up, looking at the teen as he looked shocked. A large grin formed on his face as he used his strength to knock the man away from him. A grimoire suddenly shouted out of the tower, positioning itself in front of Asta as a black and rusty sword suddenly popped out of the book. What? I thought you didn't have a grimoire, the man shouted in shock as Asta grinned, grabbing a hold of the giant sword. I'm not done, not yet, he shouted as he charged the man who shot chains at the teen. However, Asta cut through them, much to the shock of everyone. Saint, stay away from me, the man shouted. However, it was over in an instant as Asta hit the man in the head, knocking him out instantly, the chains dissolving around the two teens. Well, it looks like you did get a grimoire after all. I wouldn't expect any less from our rival, Naruto said with a large grin as the three formed a small triangle. You guys remember the promise we made? Yuno asked, a small smile forming himself as he held his fist out, the two which they both returned a small triangle forming with the fist bumps. We're rivals, and one day I'll become the Wizard King, they all shouted, sporting large grins. Turning, they all went their own ways to train. Naruto was deep in thought as he thought back to when the man made fun of his friend. I swear I heard a voice, but it didn't seem like anyone else did, he mused aloud as he found himself in a small clearing. Sitting down, he used his magic to open his grimoire as the pages flipped before him. Returning to the second cover within his book, he frowned as the script flared back to life, as if blocking the man from opening further into his own book. Man, what's the big deal with this? He shouted to no one as he rubbed his hair in frustration and confusion at the fact he couldn't even access parts of his own grimoire. The second part of his book beckoned him, however it also felt as if it was saying he wasn't ready. Come to think of it, he had never really heard of a 5-leaf clover, which confused the young boy even further. Guess I should try out my new magic, he said excitedly as he stood up, holding out his hand. He began to flip back to the spells so far. Hellfire magic. Running foxes? Naruto said to himself, activating the spell as dark red flames formed, taking the form of a fox before running off towards a tree, exploding on contact as the fire immediately climbed up the tree as it fell over, quickly going up in flames. That's so awesome, he shouted as he flipped to the next page. Hellfire magic. Giant fireball. he said with a large grin as he formed a large dark red fireball in his hands before he chucked it towards a grouping of trees. The trees went up quickly in flames as Naruto looked on in awe as the flames carved a path of destruction, feeling the heat even from 50 feet away. What type of magic is that? He suddenly heard a shout as he turned to see a tall, middle-aged man with short messy blonde hair and purple eyes, not that you could really tell due to the stars in his eyes. On the left side of his forehead is a blue six-pointed star. The man wore a white shirt with a high collar with black fur at the end, and intricate gold and purple-colored designs on its circumference. The shirt also has long sleeves with light purple cuffs, which have similar black fur and designs. A pair of gold ring-shaped ornaments are also decorating the upper and lower parts of each sleeve. Julius's brown pants are complemented by a pair of high boots of similar color, which have black fur at the collars as well. To top off the man's eccentric outfit was a long red robe that covers his entire body. The part of his robe which covers his torso is decorated with white fur. On top of the fur, Julius wears a gold necklace and a couple of medals. One of those medals, a gold medal with a green cross, is positioned on the left side of his chest, while the other, a shield with gold and red colors, is positioned on his right side. Additionally, a pair of robes are protruding from the fur on his right back. Furthermore, the robe only has a single sleeve for his right arm. Ah, it's hellfire flames? Naruto said, confused as a rather affluent man had taken such an interest in his magic or why he was even there in the first place. The man looked on at awe of the flame magic being used before he noticed something strange. Excuse me, but could you open to that second cover of your grimoire, please? He asked as Naruto continued to look at the man, confused as he had never introduced himself, but shrugged nonetheless, opening to that page. Interesting, it's as if there's another grimoire inside your grimoire, he said in awe. Yeah? Except I can't open it at all, he told the man who frowned, looking at the script. Interesting. Oh, I never introduced myself. I am you can just call me Julius, he told the boy who looked at the man before shrugging. I'm Naruto, the next Wizard King, he exclaimed to the man who was taken aback at the declaration. However, a small smile grew on his face. Is that so, Naruto-kun? I hope you work hard to accomplish this goal, and join the magic knights of this kingdom, he told the boy, resting a hand on the shoulder. He gave the young boy a soft smile. Tell you what, Naruto-kun, you have an extremely rare form of magic. Why don't I help you train it? The man offered as Naruto mulled over the offer. Sure, I don't see why that couldn't hurt, Naruto said with a soft smile of his own. Stars grew in the man's eyes once more. I can't wait, Naruto-kun, to meet me here again in a week, he told the boy as he gleefully began to leave. I look forward to learning more about your magic, he said as he seemingly teleported away, much to the shock of the boy. Looking back at his flames, they continued to burn until their source of fuel was completely gone. It seemed much to the curiosity of Naruto. Guess I'll have to look into that at a later date with Julius-sensei, he said to himself as he left to return to the church, seeing as it was growing late. A week passed rather quickly as Naruto continued to train by himself, still unable to move past the second cover. However, he continued to practice with his magic, trying to master his 2 spells. Returning the field, he saw Julius standing in the clearing as he listened peacefully to the sounds of nature. Hello, Naruto-kun. Are you ready to begin training? Julius asked as he dropped his robe, motioning for Naruto to come join him. Hi, Julius-sensei, Naruto told the man, who smiled happily. Good, because we're going to start with controlling your mana. I believe the best way to do so is by meditating, he told Naruto as he sat down, entering a relaxed pose as Naruto shrugged, joining the man. Just feel the mana in the nature around us as well as your own mana, Julius explained to Naruto, who nodded, confused why his teacher was doing this. After all, it seems so basic. Before you say anything, Naruto-kun, this is just to begin the day rested, he told the teen as the two sat there in silence before Julius would help teach Naruto. If teaching meant working Naruto to the bone every meeting, then Julius was a great teacher. The two, or rather Naruto, worked hard every day practicing using his magic under Julius' guidance. Not that Naruto ever really saw Julius' magic. Nay, Julius-sensei? Naruto decided to ask one of their training sessions. Yes, Naruto-kun? Julius asked as we watched Naruto practicing holding his flame magic for as long as he could without letting the flame change in any form. You're obviously influential, and most likely a noble, so why train a simple? A peasant like myself and an orphaned peasant at that? Naruto asked, confused why the man had taken an interest in him. Well, Naruto-kun, I believe that class shouldn't divide the mages of our nation like it does. I truly hope one day we can all live and coexist equally. He said with a soft smile, obviously omitting that as the Wizard King he was working hard to achieve this. Any other questions? He asked as Naruto nodded. What type of magic do you use? He asked. His sensei hadn't once used magic since they met, besides to arrive and leave, it seemed. Good question? One I'll tell you some other day. He told Naruto, causing the teen to HHPM at the non-answer from the man. Now focus back on what you're doing. Yes, sensei. Naruto said before concentrating on the flame before him. So you're leaving for the capital tomorrow, Naruto-kun? Julius asked Naruto, who sat meditating, simply nodding as he felt the nature of the mana around him. Julius smiled and looked up at the sky filled with the hues of a setting sun. The Wizard King has a history of leaving the capital at times to witness new magic. For some reason, when he saw the magic that Naruto used, he felt the urge to meet Naruto like he had before with some of the current magic knights such as Yami and William. Well, I hope the journey goes well, Naruto-kun. I'm expecting to hear great things about you. He said with a warm smile, placing a hand gently on the teen's shoulder. I know one squad will really want to have you when they see your magic, but I'm sure many of the squads will want to have you as well. He told the boy, who smiled, coming out of the meditative state. Thank you for all your help, Julius-sensei. He said with a bow, causing the man to chuckle and wave his hand. No need to thank me, Naruto, I just wanted to help is all. He told the boy, who rose from his bow. Now then, I should get going, but when you make it into the magical nights, I'll try to keep in contact. The man said before he disappeared into the evening sky. Naruto watched his sensei disappear and simply sat in the clearing for a while. Standing up, the teen patted his pants free of dirt and began walking back to the church. The trip to the capital would take almost 6 months, which was quite a lot of time considering the event itself would take all the day to be decided. Sighing, Naruto shook his head to ward away any doubts or worries. Picking his head up, Naruto smiled, seeing his two rivals racing each other to the church, both carrying a large amount of lumber with them. Those two never change, huh? He said to himself before a mischievous smile wormed its way onto the teen's face. Naruto began to race off to the church. Not being weighed down by lumber helped him get the edge and speed. Acting quickly, Naruto grabbed a small rope and tied it to one fence post. Seeing as the two were almost there, Naruto quickly moved to the other fence post, sitting down to make it look as if he was napping. Hearing the sound of footsteps growing louder, Naruto peeked, his eyes open, waiting for the perfect moment. As soon as the two were about to enter the fenced-off land of the church, Naruto sprung his trap, pulling the rope tight. Ah, she! Asta shouted as he felt his feet come out from underneath him. HMPF! Came from Yuno as he himself went sliding across the ground. Who? Naruto! Asta shouted as he quickly hopped up, pointing at the teen who had burned the rope quickly. Yuno for his part simply stood up, glaring at the teen who had the decency to look sheepishly towards the two. What? You two tripped over your feet? Right, Nash? Naruto asked, being the only other person to witness the action. Seeing his options, Nash nodded quickly. Yeah, ni. Asta, you guys just tripped. He said, getting a wink from Naruto when the two weren't looking at him. Whatever, it doesn't matter, I still won. Asta said to Yuno, who shook his head. I doubt that. He told the teen, who glowered at the boy. Now that I think about it, I think Yuno did fall first. Naruto said, scratching his cheek. Asta looked to his other rival and shook before he turned to the church. It was first to the church, so I can still. Asta began, only for Yuno to knock him over with wind magic. That's enough from you, Yuno told the boy as he entered the church, causing Naruto to start to laugh, as did the other orphans. Asta stood up and glared at Naruto before he began to laugh as well. Before long, the rest of the orphans minus Yuno joined in the joyous laughing. Everyone sat around the dinner table enjoying some of the cheapest food in the Hage village, which Father Orsi bought religiously. That of the tato, a large potato that was rather bland and dry but could be made into several dishes to feed the large orphan family at the church. Naruto, I'm sure you two will do well at the Magic Night selections, and Asta, you always have a home to return to here. Father Orsi told the boys with tears forming in his eyes. Thank you, Father. Asta said between bites as Yuno and Naruto ate at a more moderate pace. We'll make sure to write as much as we can, Naruto told father, who began to cry at seeing the 3 boys he had raised all grown up now. Naruto gave a soft smile before leaning back and stretching with a long yawn. I'm tired, so I'm gonna head to sleep, he told everyone as he stood up heading into the main hall of the church. Naruto took to his spot in the pile, sleep consuming him rather quickly. Boy, Naruto awoke with a start, except he wasn't in the church but looked like what Naruto assumed was a sewer. What the hell? He said aloud, pushing himself up, watching as the water left no marks that it normally should have. Come find me, Naruto heard as he looked in each direction. However, his gut told him that there was only one way to go. Walking in silence, Naruto heard the splashing of water but felt no water. Entering a large hall, Naruto saw what looked like a cage holding back a large creature of fire. This creature looked like a fox with rabbit ears for some reason and had 9 swishing tails. Hello? Naruto called out, confused to see such a creature before him. Hello? Bahaha, you stand before the mighty Kyuubi no Kitsune and that's all you can muster? The now named Kyuubi's voice was booming and his laugh almost deafened the teen. I guess yeah? I've never really heard of you is all, Naruto said, scratching the back of his head in confusion. Interesting, I suppose my legend has begun to fade from the human and elf world, Kyuubi said, staring at the teen. So you are my container in this generation? Your container? Naruto asked in confusion. Yes boy, every generation or so someone receives my grimoire within their own. The specific aren't necessary at the moment, just know you now represent me and I demand that you represent me with strength, the Kyuubi said, laying its head on its paws behind the cage. For now you know I exist and that's all you need for now. But surely this is some type of symbiotic relationship, right? Do I gain any power from you or you me? Naruto asked as the Kyuubi's eyes shot open and it stood on its paws to its full height, towering over Naruto. Is that all you care about, boy? Power? Have humans not changed at all? The beast spat out, malice dripping with every word spoken. No, of course not. I'm just trying to understand how all this works is all, Naruto said, waving his hands trying to defuse the situation. I mean, I want to become powerful to become the Wizard King. But that's only because I want to protect everyone in this kingdom, Naruto said with determination. He didn't know he had filled his voice. The Kyuubi stared at Naruto for a while before it laid back down. We have nothing more to discuss for now, be gone, he said to the teen before swishing one of its tails, a wind of air pushing Naruto out of the realm he found himself in. Awaking with a start, Naruto was covered in sweat, his heart pounding as he breathed heavily. Naruto ni? Asked Aruru, the youngest foster sister who had apparently cuddled up to her older brother figure. Wiping away the sweat and calming his breath, Naruto gave his usual big smile to the girl. I'm fine Aruru, go back to sleep. I just need to go for a walk is all, he told her as he stood up, ruffling her head before walking outside into the crisp early morning air. Taking a deep breath, Naruto breathed out a puff of mist as he began to wander aimlessly. Then the questions began to flood in as he continued to walk. Why him? What did this mean for his future as a knight? Was he just a manifestation of the Kyuubi? Taking another deep breath, he shook his head. I'm Naruto and I'm going to become the next Wizard King Datbeo, Naruto shouted to the still asleep world. Nothing will change me, he finished, huffing in a deep breath as his usual grin returned to his face. Just because I have some fuzzball in my grimoire doesn't mean anything, he said as he turned around, heading back to the church. Looking at the sun, he grinned, realizing it was just about time to get going for the small group. Returning to the church, he saw Asta and Yuno already outside waiting for him. Hey guys, sorry, was just getting my legs ready for the long journey, Naruto told them as Yuno rolled his eyes and Asta jumped from one foot to another. Whatever, just don't slow us down, Yuno told him as they set out heading for the road. Good luck everyone, Father Oris shouted. Stay safe, Sister Lily shouted as well, waving to the group. Let's get there quickly, Asta shouted as he sprinted ahead. Asta let out a HMPH before he began to chase after the teen. Naruto sighed, seeing he couldn't be left behind as he began to run just behind the two. They ran for what felt like hours before they finally slowed down, coming to a halt, everyone breathing heavily. Not yet, Asta suddenly shouted as he started to run once more. Asta, Naruto shouted before sighing, running after the teen once more. It took them a while to tire out, ending up in a mountain pass as they all collapsed where they stood unable to run anymore. Not yet, Asta shouted as he almost started up once more before Naruto, who was laying face down in the dirt, grabbed his ankle. Yuno was sitting on a rock and grabbed the back of his shirt as well. No more, Asta, we need to rest, we have almost 2 months of travel ahead of us. Naruto said, though muffled from the fact he was facing the ground. Naruto is right, we can't keep up this pace all the way to the capital. Yuno told Asta, who sighed as he plopped down on the ground before all the teens' stomachs grumbled. Looking at each other, they all laughed as they searched for a source of food. The 2 months passed by quicker than they imagined as the group moved through the country. Passing cities as they continued their journey, even going through a desert at one point, much to the displeasure of the group. But they made it to the capital, which was bustling with activity. Everywhere they looked was a new sight or smell, nothing was the same. Asta stopped at a stand with purple snakes manned by an older woman. Naruto stopped looking at the old lady and her magic felt familiar for some reason. The old lady looked at him, offering a smile, causing Naruto to frown and shrug. It felt like Julius Sensei, but he knew his magic wasn't transformation magic, right? Shrugging, Naruto continued to walk through the streets with Asta quickly catching up. The group wandered aimlessly before coming to a coliseum with people cheering outside it. Looks like this is us, Naruto said to the group, who looked at each other nodding with large smiles. Good luck everyone, people shouted. Do your best. Another voice called out. The kingdom believes in you. Another shouted. Asta soaked up the praise as he smiled and waved at everyone. They made it into a line rather quickly, which for its part moved quickly as well, allowing them to make it to the register. Yuno was first to the window. Name and where you're from? He asked, looking at the teen. Yuno from Hage Village, he told the man, who nodded, writing it down. Can I see your grimoire please? He asked. Yuno nodded, pulling it out, shocking the man quickly. A 4-leaf clover? He said in awe as he put his hand on the grimoire, causing it to glow. Coughing into his hand, the man composed himself quickly. You are number 164. He informed Yuno, who nodded, walking to the side. Naruto walked up as the man prepared the paperwork. Name and where you're from? He asked the teen, who gave a grin. Naruto and I are from Hage Village. He told the man, who nodded. 2 people from the boonies, huh? Can I see your grimoire as well? He said, looking up as Naruto showed his unique grimoire, causing the man to sputter. Another 4-leaf clover. He shouted. His shock overrode most of the functions as he placed his hand on the grimoire, causing it to glow as well. The 1st of January 165. He told Naruto as Asta walked up, the man instinctively grabbing another piece of paper. Asta from Hage Village. Asta shouted, shoving the grimoire in the man's face. And this is my grimoire. He shouted as the man nodded, his face pressed against the leather. Placing his hand on the book, it glowed as the man looked at the paperwork. 166. He told Asta in a daze as the teen ran to join his friends who were walking into the arena. 2 4-leaf clovers? And both from peasants in the boonies? Unsettling fa. Came a voice from a young teen who watched the interaction. However, he stared at Asta, feeling no magic power from the boy. A wicked grin came onto his face as an idea passed by his brain. This is so cool, Asta shouted, looking around at the large venue, which was filled to the brim with Magic Knight hopefuls. Naruto was also in awe, while Yuno looked indifferent to the world around them. Surely you must feel something about this all, Naruto said to his stoic brother, who simply shrugged. Naruto sighed as he looked around, and suddenly a large flock of birds descended on the arena. The birds pestered almost everyone in the arena, well, almost everyone. Yuno and Naruto were unbothered by the birds, while Asta was swarmed. What's the deal with these guys? Naruto asked as he held up a hand. However, the bird closest away flew away from his hand quickly. From what I've heard, these birds can detect magic and stay away from high amounts of magic power, Yuno said to the two as they looked to Asta, who was being picked at by the birds. Oh really? That's really cool, Asta shouted before noticing that he was surrounded by a ton of birds as his eyes widened, running off into the crowd screaming in fear. Naruto laughed, shaking his head at his friend's antics. However, he watched as he ran into a towering man with rippling muscles. Asta, Naruto said with a sigh, walking over as the man literally picked up the boy by the head. Crushing could be heard as Naruto formed a soft smile. Excuse me sir, could you please let go of my friend, he didn't mean any harm," Naruto said to the man as he noticed the magic knight robes. This brat ran into me and mouthed off to me, I'm just teaching him a lesson is all," the unnamed man said. This man was massive, towering over the two teens. He had gray eyes and black hair of medium length that was messily combed backward, making it stick outwards. Additionally, he sports a stubble mustache and beard. His attire is very simple and consists only of a white shirt and black trousers. The trousers have an extra layer of tan leather that covers his outer thighs and down to his knees. The trousers are only supported by a belt around his waist. He wore another pair of belts, one of which he uses to carry his grimoire. Lastly, he wears black high boots that cover most of his calves. He also wore a black banner with the squad's insignia on it. He wore it over his right shoulder and it is attached by 2 strings to his left shoulder. The banner also had tattered edges, seeming to have been ripped off from a bigger banner. That's Yami Sukahiro, captain of the Black Bulls. Naruto heard a whisper in the crowd that had begun to form. I understand that Sir Asta is a bit of a troublemaker, Naruto said as he put a hand on the mont's wrist, squeezing tightly as his dark red flames began to form around his shoulder. But I would appreciate it if you let him go. Naruto's smile dropped as his eyes formed a glare. The flames began to rush forward as Yami stared at Naruto, smoke billowing from his cigarette, and his eyes seemed to hold respect for the boy. Before anything else could be said or done, their attention was grabbed by a booming voice. Please calm down so we may begin the Magic Knight selection, a voice called out as Yami dropped the teen and walked away. 8 figures walked out of the corridor as everyone hushed up, staring at the strong source of mana. At the head of the procession was led by a man of an average height and a lean build. He has visible purple eyes, however he wore a helmet that also functions as a mask that obscures the upper half of his face and his hair. The mask is very elaborate, and is made up of a large gold piece covering the area around his right eye, and a smaller blue piece covering the area around his left eye. The helmet has white and red patches of fur on the back edge, and 2 white feathers that stick up on the left side. The right eye hole has a red border outline, with 2 lines sticking out on both the top and bottom halves, while the left eye hole has the same design, except white colored with slightly longer lines. The man wore a double-breasted and long-sleeved shirt with a high collar. The shirt itself consists of 2 different colors, as it is white at the sides and blue in the center. Gold trimmings and buttons can be seen on the blue portion of the front of the shirt. The sleeves are mostly made of white fabric, except for the wrist area where they are made of a yellowish fabric. The shirt extends below the man's waist and he wears a dark belt on top of it. He also wears white pants and a pair of high black boots. He wore one of the Magic Knight squad robes, which covers his torso and is gold in color. It has a blue-colored fur around the border of the hood and a pair of red ropes, which come from the left shoulder and connect to the gold-colored button on the right shoulder. Furthermore, at the left-hand side is positioned the squad's insignia. Underneath his robe, he wore a long red cloak that reached his ankles. I am William Vangiance, leader of the Golden Dawn and head examiner of this year's Magic Knight selection, he announced, raising his arm as branches extend from the sky turning into brooms. We will now begin the exams with a simple test, flying on a broom. Naruto plucked his broom from the sky, as did Asta. Naruto looked at the simple broom before he shrugged, placing it between his legs. He focused his magic into the stick and began to float upwards. This is pretty cool actually. How are you doing, Asta? Naruto asked, looking at the teen who had a face of concentration, however he was unable to go anywhere. You look to be having trouble, announced a voice which floated alongside Asta. The voice belonged to a teenager who had a lean build and medium-length blonde hair. His hair is combed backward and held together with a black hairband, leaving only several strands left hanging in front of his forehead. His attire consists of a gray shirt with a dark gray vest with a wide V-shaped collar on top of it. He also wears white trousers and a pair of black high boots that have a pair of tan belts on each of them. In addition, he wore a tan belt that is connected to a pouch that he uses to carry his grimoire. The pouch is placed on his left-hand side. On top of everything, he wore a magenta coat with long sleeves and black horizontal stripes around the forearms. I am Saint Bronzaza, it seems like you're trying too much. You just have to relax into it, he told Asta, who grinned and began to talk to the man trying to learn how to fly on the broom. Naruto, seeing the team was in good hands, decided to stand on his broom, floating over to Yuno, who stared at Asta. "Seems like you got the hang of this pretty quickly too, huh, Yuno?" Naruto asked the teen, who nodded, looking at the teen. "Copying my style, that's not like you, Naruto." Yuno teased as Naruto grinned, scratching the back of his head. "I didn't like the way the broom felt as I sat on it, so this was the best option," Naruto explained before squatting down, watching the others struggle in boredom. Glancing to the Magic Knight captains, each stared at him and Yuno in interest. He also noticed that Yami seemed to hold an interest in the teen, staring straight at him before looking at Asta. After a while, the next task began, with each of the contestants firing their magic at a wall and then a moving target. Naruto used his Hellfire magic instead of regular fire magic, catching the attention of a man with purple eyes and long, straight vermilion hair. His hair is neatly combed to the back, while leaving his long fringe combed to the left in a wavy hairstyle. One of his notable features is the red markings around his eyes. Another one is a diamond-shaped mark of similar color on the center of his forehead. Additionally, he also wears a pair of red earrings. His attire consists of a white tunic which is covered by a dark blue shirt with long sleeves and high collar. The shirt is decorated with gold-colored fabric with vertical stripes design on its edges, collars, and along the sleeves. In order to keep the shirt together, he wears a purple sash around his waist. Moreover, he wears white trousers and black high boots with similar design as his shirt. On top of his attire, he wears a long red cape. The man wore one of the squad's signature robes that only covers his torso. His squad robe has similar color as his personal robe. The robe has gold intricate designs at the lower front edge and complemented with a scarf of similar red color. Additionally, a pair of gold-colored ropes are protruding from between the scarf and the robe at the front, and a purple stone is decorating each end. Lastly, the squad's insignia is located at the center back of the robe. Excuse me, but what type of fire magic is that?" Naruto heard a voice ask him, causing the teen turn around and immediately blush. Standing before him was a young girl his age with a voluptuous build. She has yellow eyes and long wavy vermilion hair with bangs on her forehead. Additionally, she also wears a pair of earrings on her ears. The girl wore a rather fancy attire which consisted of a puffy cream-colored sweater with long sleeves, white puffy short pants, and a brown corset. Below the corset, she also wears another lighter brown-colored piece of fabric that has frilly edges. The corset is tied at the front with strings. Her footwear consists of a pair of boots that are tightly fit her legs and extends above her knees. They are light-colored and have a split at the top in which are kept together by strings. The boots also have frilly edges below the collars. On top of all of those, she also wore a dark red mantle, which has a white lining made of similar material as the rest of the mantle. Oh, it's Hellfire magic," Naruto told the girl as he composed himself. "I'm Naruto." He introduced himself with a large smile which the girl returned. "I'm Mimosa Vermilion," she told the young man. "It's nice to meet you," they said at the same time, causing the two to blush and turn away from each other. What magic do you use?" he asked, causing the girl to turn back towards him. "Oh, I use plant magic," she informed Naruto. "I mostly use it to heal, but I've learned a few offensive spells," he explained to Naruto, who nodded in awe. "That's really cool," he said to the girl, who smiled again. Suddenly a plant seed found its way into everyone's hands as Naruto looked at it in confusion. "The next test is to make this seed sprout with your magic," Williams's voice told everyone as Naruto looked at the plant seed before him. Shrugging, he channeled his magic into the seed, causing it to sprout quickly into a large plant of flames swaying back and forth. Looking at Mimosa, he saw as the seed sprouted into an actual plant, and he saw Asta struggling to produce anything. "The next test shall be creating something with your magic. It can be anything," William announced as Naruto thought for a moment. He wasn't well versed in the creation side of things, but suddenly something came to his mind. Holding his hand with a large grin, Naruto announced his creation. "Hellfire creation magic. Firefox," he said as a small fox of fire formed and yipped at his creature, his tail flowing behind him as Mimosa stared at the fox with a small blush forming. "So cute," she said to herself before holding her hand out. "Plant creation magic. Guidepost." She announced a small plant blooming, showing a projection of the arena and the large sources of magic. "That's really cool, Mimosa," Naruto told the girl who offered a smile. Once everyone had shown off their creation magic, William called everyone to form up. I would like to begin with the statement that we're all impressed with your magic shown today. Our final test for you all is a one-on-one fight. William announced as everyone talked amongst themselves. You may pick your opponents. He finished as everyone began to pair themselves with others. Nay, Asta, why don't me and you fight first? Asked Sek as Asta grinned and nodded. Once they made their way into the center, Sek whispered something into Asta's ear, causing the boy's face to go blank. I'll let you have the first strike, Fa, shouted Sek as Asta's face grew determined, pulling his sword out of his grimoire. A large dome formed around the teen who was taunting Asta. You won't be able to get past this barrier, he shouted. Asta didn't say anything as his foot dug into the ground before he flew towards Sek, his sword being pulled backwards before he sliced right through the dome, smashing his sword right into Sek. The teen let out some spittle as he was smashed down into the ground and out cold. I'm going to become the Wizard King one day. Just watch me, Asta announced seemingly out of nowhere as everyone in the crowd began to laugh and sneer at the boy. However, he simply brushed it off, unfazed by the mockery. Naruto looked at all the captains who sat forward in their chairs, surprised at how Asta had simply cut through the defensive spell. They all stared at the boy who walked away, sealing his sword away into his grimoire. Excuse me, I would like to fight you, a teen said behind Naruto, causing the teen to turn and look at him. There wasn't much to him. He had brown hair and brown eyes, however his clothes showed his class. He wore a flowing sliver robe over a long-sleeve white shirt with black trousers and boots that went up to his knees. After all, you, a peasant, have been speaking with royalty this entire time, he said, mostly to himself. Ah, sure? He said, confused by the royalty part. He began to walk into the ring, missing the way that the man winked at Mimosa. The girl looked at the teen in disgust as she looked at Naruto, who stood staring at the teen who took his place in front of the blonde. Begin, announced a cloaked wizard knight. How dare a peasant such as you talk to royalty such as Mimosa? I will win this fight in her heart, the teen said, holding his hand out, his grimoire flying up and flipping open. Naruto's hair fell over his eyes, covering them, however a look of disgust filled his face. So Mimosa is just an object to be fought over? You disgust me, he said simply as his grimoire opened, flipping to one of the spells he had taught himself. Ice magic. Ice spears, the teen shouted as ice spears shot up from the ground, heading towards Naruto, who still hadn't reacted. Naruto, shouted Mimosa, fearing Naruto wasn't going to react. Asta and Yuno looked on in fear, however that fear turned to awe as Naruto's face raised and it looked like fire had filled his eyes. Forming behind him looked like a dark red fox of fire which towered over the blonde. Hellfire magic. Roar of the fox, Naruto shouted as the fox seemed to roar with the sound of fire as it rushed forward, destroying the spikes, the teen looking at it in fear. The fox stopped just short of hitting the teen, instead smacking him with a paw which knocked the teen out. Winner Naruto of Hage, announced the wizard as healers rushed out, taking the singed teen to the quarters within the arena. Naruto looked to the captains, who all looked at the teen in awe at the power he had shown. Naruto turned on his heel, taking his place back besides Mimosa, who looked at the teen in awe. Sorry to worry you like that, he told her, looking sheepishly, having heard her shout, causing the girl to blush. Oh, you're fine, Naruto, she told the teen. Some more fights came and went, with Yuno finally fighting another noble who wanted to put the peasant in his place. However, Yuno quickly dealt with the teen, defeating him almost as soon as the fight began. Before long, all the fights had come to a close, with everyone called back to the square. After watching you all and thinking about each of your skills, the captains here will ultimately signal who they want in their squads. If a captain raises their hand, that means they want you in their squad. If multiple captains raise their hands, you will decide which squad you want to join. William announced as everyone looked at the captains, their emotions running high. Number 1, please step forward, the scribe of the event announced. All those that would like this mage in their squad raise their hand, he asked as he watched the captains intently, however none of them raised their hands. No hands for number 1, number 2 please step forward, the scribe announced. The teen looked crushed but returned to the crowd. This continued for a while, with very few captains offering a spot in their squad. Number 43 please step forward, the scribe announced as Mimosa flashed a smile at Naruto before stepping forward. Two hands rose for Mimosa, the first coming from William and the second coming from the man in the red robe. Mimosa looked intently at the hands present. I choose the Golden Dawn," she announced as William nodded, offering a simple smile. Naruto smiled at Mimosa when she stepped back beside him, offering a low congratulations. After that, Naruto zoned out till he heard Yuno's number. 164, please step forward, the scribe announced. Yuno stepped before the crowd, a wave of murmurings rolling through the crowd. Please raise your hands if you would like 164 in your squad, the scribe asked. To everyone's shock, every single squad captain raised their hand as Yuno looked at each squad for a moment. A look of determination filled his eyes as he zeroed in on William. I choose the Golden Dawn, Yuno announced as William offered a simple nod in response. 165, please step forward. Naruto shot a smile at Mimosa before stepping forward, offering a nod to Yuno as they passed. Please raise your hand if you would like 165 in your squad. Once again, every single captain raised their hand for Naruto, causing the team to scratch the back of his head looking at all the captains. He looked them all in the eyes, trying to gauge their interest. The captain of what he had learned was the Crimson Lion's magic felt warm and inviting like flames. If he joined that squad, he knew he'd have plenty of help with his flame magic. The Golden Dawn had only offered 2 spots to 2 mages, that of Yuno and Mimosa. He had to admit he liked the idea of staying with people he knew. Finally, his eyes settled on the last captain that really interested the team. Yami of the Black Bulls. The man seemed to have taken a liking to him, and Naruto wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not yet. Each squad offered its own perks, it would seem, and own ways forward in the world. Naruto sighed as he placed his hand under his chin, striking up a thinking pose. Gaki, we don't have all day. Yami's voice called out. I know it's a very hard choice to make, considering each squad will offer its own pitfalls and its own advantages. If I'm going to be the Wizard King one day, I have to think this through. Naruto said back that everyone, even the captains, looked on with anticipation for which squad the team would choose. Could I speak with the 2 captains I have narrowed it down to? Naruto asked, causing everyone to face fault at the team's request as everyone looked at William, who shrugged. I don't see why not, it would be best not to make a rash decision. He reasoned. May I speak with Yami of the Black Bulls and Fuegoleon of the Crimson Lions? Naruto requested that the 2 look at each other before nodding. Standing up, the 2 motioned for him to enter the stairs below. Naruto walked forward as the scribe announced a short break. Entering the stairs, Naruto's boots echoed against the ground as he stood before the 2 captains, who looked at the young man. Thank you for meeting with me, Naruto said with a bow as Yami sighed. What do you wish to discuss, kid? He asked as Naruto looked at the 2, thinking of how he wanted to word his request. Well, I can't seem to pick between your 2 squads. For some reason both have the same amount of merits in my opinion. The Black Bulls have been called the worst squad, but that's only due to your destructive nature. However, I've heard you are one of the closest squads out there. Fuegoleon Sama, I've heard of the reputation of the Crimson Lions being one of the proudest squads out there. I also know, just based on how your magic feels, you would be an excellent teacher for me. He told the 2 who looked at each other his reasoning had merit so far. I would like to join the Black Bulls, but if it was possible, I would like to train with Captain Fuegoleon whenever possible, he said with a bow as the 2 captains looked at each other before Yami began to laugh. I like you, kid. You have guts asking to join one squad while training under another captain. He finally got out before looking to Fuegoleon. I don't see why not, after all I only have 1 member with flame magic and it's not on the same level as yours, Yami said with a shrug as Fuegoleon thought about it for a moment. While I am disappointed you have chosen not to join my squad, I suppose this is a good compromise. As long as Naruto here can join a few missions here and there with my squad, Fuegoleon suggested as Yami thought about it for a moment before he shrugged. Why not, it'd be a good olive branch for our squads, Yami said as Naruto smiled, seeing his plan had seemingly worked for the best. Welcome to the Black Bulls, kid, Yami said, taking a puff of his cigarette before the 2 parties turned around, leaving with Naruto standing before the captains once more. Everyone's conversations hushed as they stared at Naruto in anticipation. I choose the Black Bulls, Naruto announced as everyone began to whisper amongst themselves. One of the most promising young men of the exams had chosen the worst squad? It was an upset for sure, however it was Naruto's choice. Naruto walked back into the crowd with Mimosa offering her own congratulations. However, I'm surprised you joined the Black Bulls. Surely my cousin would be a better teacher for you? She was confused just like everyone else. Well yeah, but I just felt a calling to the Black Bulls. Plus I managed to convince Fuegoleon to take me on as a student. He said with a smile. 166 please step forward. Asta grinned stepping forward before the captains. Any offers for 166? The scribe asked as all the captains stared at him unmoving. Asta's grin disappeared, turning to fear as he grit his teeth. If that's your reaction, maybe you weren't as good as I thought? You want to become the Wizard King, it takes more than just swinging a sword. Yami spoke up looking at the teen as he took another drag on his cigarette. You don't even have any magic, and on top of that no one knows where your power comes from. That makes people not want you. Yami said to the boy whose fist clenched. It doesn't matter if I don't have any magic power, I will still become the Wizard King one day. Asta announced to the captains as Yami stood up from his chair, jumping before Asta, letting out an intense magical power, not that the teen could feel it. This is the power of a captain. Can you still claim that you will become the Wizard King one day? Yami asked. Asta looked at the man, his mouth opening as he clenched his fist harder. I'll work every day to become stronger till one day I am the Wizard King. Asta shouted at Yami, who began to laugh. I like you, kid. I will let you into my squad. Join or die. Yami said to the teen as he was covered in a purple aura, scaring just about everybody but Asta. Hi. Asta shouted in joy as Naruto smiled at the teen. It looked like he would be with someone he knew after all. By the evening everyone had been gone through, and those not selected left the arena while those who were stayed around. Naruto and Mimosa continued to talk and get to know one another before the Golden Dawns began to leave. Mimosa, I was wondering if I could write to you? Naruto asked, failing at hiding his blush as the girl with her own blush nodded. I would like that very much, Naruto. Mimosa told the boy as she went to join Captain William. Yuno walked up beside Naruto holding out his fist, which Naruto bumped with his own. Look after Asta for me, will ya? Yuno requested the boy, causing Naruto to smile with a nod. Well, of course Yuno, someone does after all. Naruto promised, which caused Yuno to let out a rare smile before he left himself. Come on kid, it's time to. Yami told Naruto as Asta came to join them. The man was flanked by two members of his squad. The first was a slender young man of average height and build. He has droopy eyes, and his light brown hair is somewhat unruly. He has a pleasant, smiling expression. His outfit is fairly simple, wears a light green, loose-fitting tunic with long sleeves and long tails at the back. He also wears dark trousers and a green pair of wide, knee-high boots that lace up the front. He wears the short black bull's mantle, and his grimoire holder is on his left hip. He also wears a pair of green earrings. The second man was a little more unpleasant but seemed nice enough. He also had a slender build, with pale skin and short black hair that is slicked back. His face is long with a large nose and lacks eyebrows. He wears black eyeshadow in large circles around his red eyes, and also wears black lipstick and nail polish. His attire consists of a dark gray jacket, red trimming and red cuffs. His pants are a matching gray and are tucked into knee-high black boots. He wears a black belt over his jacket, and a black pouch for his grimoire hangs on his left hip. Over this he wears the Black Bull's signature robe. His dark gray peaked cap has a black band and bill and the Black Bull badge. This is Finneral and Gordon. Yami introduced the two. Hello there, Finneral said with a large smile. Mumble 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 was all the Naruto heard from Gordon. He could feel his sweat drop at not being able to understand the man. Alright Finneral, create the portal. Yami instructed as Finneral nodded. Where are we going exactly? Asta asked, only to be picked up by his jacket. No time for questions, Yami said as he picked up Naruto as well, much to his protest. Suddenly the two were through a portal in the middle of the air as Yami, Gordon and finally Finneral stepped through. Before them was a large mansion that almost looked like a castle without a wall, much to the awe of Asta. Welcome to the hideout of the Black Bulls, Yami announced to the two as they looked at their new home. Welcome to the hideout of the Black Bulls, Yami said as the two teens looked on in awe at the large mansion tucked away within one of the forests of Clover Kingdom. It's massive, Asta shouted as stars formed his eyes. It was bigger than anything they had seen in Hage, and it was now their home. We have our own rooms, right? Naruto asked Yami, who nodded. Awesome, Naruto said with a large smile, just happy he didn't have to listen to Asta snoring anymore. Now what are you dumbasses waiting for? It's time to see the inside, Yami said as the two walked over to the doors. Asta reached them first and prepared to open them. Hey, where's the third newbie? Yami asked. However, the two teens in front of him ignored the comment. Wait, Asta, Naruto shouted, stepping in front of his foster brother. Flames burst through the door. Naruto acted quickly, dividing the wave of fire in half. Walking inside, they were greeted to quite the sight. Stay still, dumbass, shouted a teen who used a bat made of flames to knock balls of fire towards another teen. The teen hitting the fire had a lean build and two different colored hair. Light gray hair at the top, black hair at the sides. Additionally, he also sports a black mohawk. On his face is a straight line mark surrounded by 3 pairs of dots on his left forehead. The teen sports a white shirt covered by a navy leather jacket and navy trousers. In addition, his jacket covers half of his torso. He wears black fingerless gloves, a pair of blue shades, a pair of black boots, a chain hanging from the left side of his waist connected to his trousers, and a belt that he uses to support his pouch containing his grimoire. The pouch is black and has a skull and crossbones symbol at the front. Lastly, he had the black robes of the squad. You're going to have to catch me, shouted the other teen with a laugh, who dodged the fireballs with wisps of lightning flying off of him. This young man was of short stature with blue eyes and medium-length messy blonde hair. His hair is long enough to cover both his ears and forehead. His outfit is very simple and consists of an aqua blue tunic with long sleeves. The sleeves get larger as they reach his hands, making the tunic appear loose. The tunic's length extends just below his waist, making it look to be a size too large. His pants are teal and extend just below his knees. Additionally, it has light-colored strips with stitch-like cross patterns at the sides, running from top to bottom. He also carries a pouch for his grimoire, which is strapped around his chest with the use of a belt. Finally, he wore a pair of light-colored brown boots that covered just above his ankles and the black robes. Munchie, munchie, munchie. They heard, turning their attention to a rather small girl who was stuffing her face with cupcakes and other sweets. This young girl had shoulder-length black hair and green eyes. She sported rather thin eyebrows and a wide forehead. She had her hair in an upside-down bun hairstyle with fringes framing both sides of her face, and her forehead left exposed. Her attire consists of only a light-colored white tunic and dark-colored pants. Her tunic extends below her waist and has long sleeves that reach slightly past her elbows. Additionally, the tunic also has a kangaroo pocket at the front of her stomach area. Her pants extend slightly below her knees and fit perfectly for her. She sports a blue satchel that she slings over her right shoulder, which carries her grimoire on her left side. Finally, she also wears a pair of light-colored yellow flats for her footwear. "My dear sister Marie," came a shout as the two turned, looking at a man staring at a small picture. The man had a rather slender build with light skin and shaggy light brown hair that draped over his forehead and left eye, which was brown. He wears a long-sleeved, blue and purple shirt under a brown, short-sleeved shirt, light brown trousers tucked into brown trench boots. He had on the black robes of the squad, black with 2 small jewels bull insignia. "It's so loud," came the sweet voice of a lady, turning to look at that voice. Naruto blushed, seeing a rather beautiful woman. The woman had a rather voluptuous body with long, wavy pink hair, purple eyes and full lips. She keeps her hair loose in a lob hairstyle. The part that made Naruto blush was the fact she was only dressed in her undergarments. They consist of a pair of red, thin-strapped lingerie with frilly designs. She still, however, wore her squad robes over top of it all. Sitting next to her on the couch was an extremely large, heavy-set man with slicked-back black hair, sphere earrings with links that connect to other small spheres that hang, and glowing eyes. Asta looked on in awe before he coughed into his hand. Excuse, I'm happy to meet you all. I am Asta," he said. However, everyone seemed to ignore him, much to his dismay. Looking back, Naruto noticed Yami getting annoyed, probably due to the explosions happening in the hall. "Oi dumbasses, stop wrecking the place," Yami suddenly shouted, slamming his hand into the wall, causing a large hole to form. "You just destroyed it even further though," Naruto said to himself, mostly with Yami either not or deciding not to hear him. As if on cue, all the members of the squad formed a semi-circle in front of the captain. "Welcome home, Captain," everyone said, happy to see the leader of their squad. "Can we fight, Captain, can we?" asked the smaller boy as he stood up once again, punching the air, excited to fight someone it seemed. "Not at the moment, we have 2 new members to introduce," Yami announced as everyone finally noticed the 2 young teens. "Who are these 2 fine young boys?" the girl in just underwear said, walking up to the 2 with a wink before puking to the right of them, causing Naruto to jump out of the splash zone. Yami nudged Asta, who took this message, bowing to everyone. "Hello everyone, I am Asta and I look forward to working with you all," he shouted rather loudly. "Are you always that loud?" the man with the multicolored hair asked. "To answer your question, yes, but you get used to it. And I am Naruto. I can't wait to work besides you all," he said with a bow as well. "Oi, Wheels, introduce everyone," Yami said, causing Finneral to step forward. "Okay. The lady vomiting in Vanessa likes to work hard and play hard and is a pretty nice lady and great lady. Next up is Luck, he loves to fight but overall is a great guy," he said, pointing to the smaller man. "Will you 2 fight me? You both feel really strong," the now the identified Luck asked, causing Naruto to laugh, rubbing the back of his head. "Maybe later?" he asked. "Okay." Luck accepted, a smile never leaving his face. "Next up is Magna," Finneral said, pointing toward the man with the multicolored hair. "He's rather brutish when you get to know him, but overall he's a great guy," he said, causing Magna to shout, undignified by how he was described. "Then there's Gauche. He really cares about his sister but overall he's a great guy," Finneral informed the 2, pointing at the man with a picture who barely looked up at them. "If you're lucky, I'll let you see my angel Marie," he said before blood fell from his nose, creeping out Naruto slightly. "Lastly, there's Charmy, who does a lot of cooking and just as much eating, but overall she's a great friend and lady," said small girl, held out a muffin. "I'll share half of my munchies with Eula," she said, offering the 2 a quarter of the muffin she had, which both took a bite of. "This is pretty good, thank you, Charmy," Naruto said between bites. "Yeah, thank you," Asta shouted as he chewed on the food, which Charmy nodded to. "You've already met Gordon, who doesn't say much, he mumbles a lot but he's a great guy," Finneral finished introducing everyone, causing Naruto's face to morph into a deadpan. "Why did you describe everyone as a great guy or lady?" he mostly said to himself but shrugged. "I can feel the mana coming from you, but you short stuff, I don't feel any mana, is this some kind of joke?" Magna soundly asked. "I don't accept you into the squad just yet. Not without an initiation," Magna said, causing stars to once again form in Asta's eyes. "I'll pass this initiation, no problem," Asta shouted, causing Magna to chuckle. "If you pass, you'll get your own robe," Magna informed the teen, whose eyes widened in anticipation. "Alright," Asta shouted as Magna motioned everyone to go outside, as everyone stood around watching the 2 stare off each other. "I wonder why I don't have to do an initiation?" Naruto asked as Gordon muttered something he couldn't understand. "It looks like the virgin delinquent is just trying to prove he's top dog and he doesn't think he can do so against you?" Vanessa suggested, moving closer to Naruto. "You'll have your initiation soon enough, little boy," she said with a flirtatious wink, causing Naruto to blush. "All you have to do is evade or block my attack and I'm not going to go easy," Magnus suddenly announced as his grimoire opened. Asta did the same, quickly pulling his sword out. "Hi!" he shouted as a fireball formed in Magnus' hands, catching the attention of Naruto. "Ooh, so he uses fire magic as well?" Naruto said, watching the fireball. Magnus slowly wound him his throw like a baseball pitcher before taking a step forward, throwing the ball. It moved quicker than Naruto or Asta anticipated, flying quickly towards the teen. Asta seemed to not move for a while as Naruto saw the fear in his foster brother's eyes, however he also saw the wheels in his head turning. Naruto felt dread as he watched the ball move closer to Asta. "Asta!" Naruto shouted as his grimoire opened, however Yami raised his hand, stopping Naruto from acting further. Suddenly Asta turned the direction of the sword, using the blunt end like a battle, hitting the fireball with all his might, which went flying straight towards Magna. "Shit!" Magna shouted, however Naruto felt the mana leave the fireball at the last moment as it exploded. Naruto let out a sigh of relief, seeing that Asta was unharmed, and he felt something draped over his shoulders. "This is for you, kid," Yami said with a nod, which Naruto returned with a smile, seeing the robes of the squad now resting on his shoulder. "That was awesome," You really had me worried for a moment there, Magna said as he stepped out of the fire. His clothes look worse for wear and the glasses he wore were cracked. You've earned this, Magna said, tossing the robes to Asta, who caught them confused. You know I don't have any magical power, right? Asta asked, confused why the man's mood changed so suddenly on him. That doesn't really matter as long as you're a man's man, Manga shouted, causing Asta to smile quickly, throwing on the robes. Good job, kid, Yami said with a nod while Vanessa stared at him before snapping her fingers. You're missing something, she said as threads suddenly formed embroidering his headband with the symbol of the Black Bulls, much to the teen's awe. It's time for a tour, Magna announced, dragging the two members along as the sun began to rise. I wonder where the third new member is, Yami said to himself, which Naruto barely caught but shrugged it off. He simply followed Magna back into the main hall they had already seen. So this is the main hall where we all hang out, Magna announced as they headed further into the mansion. Entering a sauna and bathing area, the teen pointed around them. And this is the bathing area. The water is always quite warm, Magna told them as he took them further into the base. Arriving in front of a large cage filled with beasts looking down at them. Naruto was quickly reminded of his meeting with Kyuubi, which disturbed the boy, but he shrugged it off. These are Yami's pets. It's often the job of the new members to look after them. I've been looking over them for now, but it's your turn, Asta, Magna said with a grin forming on his face at passing the torch along. Motioning for them to follow, they ended up in a junction with a long hallway filled with rooms on both sides. On the left side is the female quarters and on the right in the male quarters. Now then, pick a room you two, the ones without names are unclaimed, he informed the two as they walked up to the two rooms, choosing one next to each other. Naruto walked into his, looking around. It was rather Spartan with just a bed, dresser and desk, but Naruto figured he could spruce it up a bit. My own room? Hell yeah, he could hear Asta shouted, causing Naruto to chortle slightly before horror dawned on his eyes, realizing he'd still have to hear Asta's yelling. I wonder if it's too late to reconsider joining the Crimson Lions? Naruto said to himself as he set his bag down within the room. Turning around, he saw Magna and Asta waiting for the teen, so he supposed redecorating would have to wait. What magic do you use anyways, Naruto? Magna asked. He didn't get a chance to test out this new recruit like he did Asta, having been accepted by everybody already by the time he was done. Maybe you'll find out later, Naruto said with a grin and a wink, enraging Magna. However, before they could respond, he ran into someone who nearly tumbled as well, catching themselves. Naruto looked at the girl who had stopped his battle of wits with Magna, seeing a rather cute girl who once again made Naruto blush. She was a rather beautiful girl with a slender build and pink eyes. She had long, silver-colored hair, which was tied in pigtails, with her center bangs over her forehead. Additionally, she wears a pair of purple stud earrings with a cross-flory fichy shape, and a silver bracelet on her left wrist. She wore a sleeveless, backless, short purple dress covered by a silver-colored blazer. The blazer has a backless design with sleeves attached at the back that extends slightly beyond her elbows with gold-colored cuffs. The blazer also has a pair of pins attached to it around her collarbone area. Additionally, it has frilly edges and a rounded tailcoat that extends down to her knees. Furthermore, the blazer extends up to her neck where it has frilly edges and is held together by a gold locket. She wore a brown leather belt that supports her pouch, which has a similar color and gold ornaments at its corners. The pouch hangs on her right side, and contains her grimoire. She also wears a pair of silver-colored leg warmers with a gold-colored cuff at both ends and a pair of sandals. To finish off her appearance was a black robe with the symbol of their squad on it, causing Naruto to turn his head to the side. He hadn't seen her with everybody else, but come to think of it, Yami did mention something about 3 new recruits. Who the hell are you? Magna shouted, confused, causing the girl to HMPH. I'm royalty insect and you have no right to talk to me, she said, crossing her arms, causing Naruto to frown. Something about that attitude irked him, but he couldn't explain why. Oh, you're wearing the squad's robes, doesn't that make you one of us? Asta asked, confused why someone of their squad would treat a squadmate like that. Come to think of it, why weren't you around earlier? Asta asked. You didn't see me earlier because I don't want to be here. My brother had me placed in this squad, she said with a huff, turning away from the teens as she looked at the squad robes. Screw this, was all she said as she threw off the robes and stomped off. Hey, where are you going? Asta shouted, ready to follow her. However, Naruto planted a hand on his shoulder. "I'll take care of this. I have a way with words after all," Naruto said with a smile, having already picked up the robes she had dropped on the ground. Waving, Naruto began to walk off following the girl. "Well, that was odd," Magna said as he dragged Asta off to show him other parts of the base. Naruto didn't make it far before he felt magic being fired off, causing the man to frown in confusion. Looking up, he saw a ball of water coming towards him. Had she felt his presence? Shrugging, Naruto avoided the large ball of water as he made his way into the brush. "Damn it, why can't I aim right?" he heard the girl shout. Naruto crouched down, taking a look at the clearing that she had found her way into. It was riddled with craters. However, it seemed like she was targeting a tree which wasn't even touched. Naruto watched as she fired off a few more large balls of water to no success. "Damn it," she shouted again as she fell on her knees. The ball made its way towards Naruto, however he simply moved out of the way, thankful that Julia's sensei had trained him. However, he found himself in the clearing with the girl's eyes on him. "Ah hey, I'm sorry I followed you, but I figured you might want some help?" he said as the girl gained a fearful look for some reason. "You're just going to make fun of me, aren't you?" the girl shouted, causing Naruto to incline his head slightly. "What? No, of course." Naruto was cut off by a scream of no as a large ball of water surrounded the girl with torrents of water shooting out, lashing out at everything in its way. "Wait, shit," Naruto shouted as he was smacked by one of the tendrils clutching the robe in his hands. Landing on his back, Naruto let out a HMPH, being back in front of the base. "That didn't go well at all," Naruto said as he pushed himself off the ground. Everyone came rushing outside. "What happened?" Yami asked, looking at the large circle rather calmly. "Honestly not sure, but it seems, I don't think I ever caught her name lost control of her magic?" Naruto said, just as confused as everyone else. "Oi kid," Yami said as he plucked up Asta by the head. "Deal with this, why don't you?" he said as Asta looked at him confused before he was flung headfirst at the large sphere of water. Wait, I wasn't ready," Asta shouted as he pulled out his grimoire and his sword appeared. Flying through the air, he sliced through the magic sphere, dissolving the spell. "Good one, kid," Yami shouted as the two began to fall. "Wait, shit," Yami said as he saw Asta flailing. "I can't get them both, they're too far apart." Finneral shouted as Naruto suddenly rushed forward. "I'll get the girl, you get Asta," Naruto shouted as Finneral nodded, a portal opening underneath Asta. Naruto ran forward, watching the girl's trajectory as she fell. When she was close enough, Naruto jumped towards the girl, grabbing her bridal style as he landed on a tree branch. The girl looked up at him, surprised that he had even decided to help her. "Naruto. My name is Naruto, by the way," he with a rather large smile as he put the girl down, who was now blushing. "You left this behind, Noel Silva," she said as Naruto extended the robe he had been holding on to as the girl looked at it. I can't even control my magic. Am I really a good fit for a Magic Knight squad?" she said, not noticing the group that had gathered near the two. "Of course you do. I don't even have magic and you have so much. You just need to learn how to control it," Asta shouted, a large smile forming on his face as everyone nodded. "You can't give up just yet, your journey has just begun," Naruto offered with a smile. "Besides, dumbass, who said I'd let you leave?" Yami said, a purple aura covering him for a moment, causing the girl to look at him with a deadpan before looking at the robe offered to her once more. "Thank you, everyone," she said, offering a smile as she grabbed the robe, putting it back on. "Let's go eat plenty of yummies." Charmy shouted to everyone's cheers as the two jumped out of the tree, following the group back to the hideout of their squad. "I don't think I've ever been more tired in my life," Naruto said, finally dragging his feet into the base as he finally found himself lying face down in his bed, feeling the stress wash off of him in an instant. His bed was comfortable enough, way better than sleeping on the ground or a pew, but it was a weird change for him. His room felt stuffed, but the boy didn't want to get up at all. Finally forcing himself to his feet, he opened the door, letting the crisp summer air wash in with the sounds of toads and crickets. "Oi, dumbass," Yami said with a knock on the door, causing Naruto to turn his head. However, the teen stayed leaning on the windowsill, looking up at the moon as he thought about Asta and Yuno. "It's open," Naruto called out, figuring it was better than having the door busted down on him by his captain. He heard the click of the door opening but barely registered it, just letting the sounds of nature waft onto him. As part of the negotiation you made with me and Fuegoleon, you'll be training with him on Tuesdays and Thursdays with an optional Sunday training," Yami said as he looked at one of his newest squad members. "Got it. Thank you again Yami Taicho for letting me train with another captain. I know you didn't have to," Naruto said with a smile as Yami exhaled a plume of smoke. "Don't mention it, kid, you remind me of a good friend of mine," he said. Now that Yami said it aloud, Naruto did look a lot like him and her. Could it be? But that was impossible, right? They never had a kid? Yami snorted as the set of questions rose in his head, opting to ask Julius about it later. "Oh yeah, this letter came for you by the way," Yami said, pulling a sealed envelope out of his back pocket, placing it on the desk of the teen. "Thank you Yami," Naruto said, ready to pass out on the spot as the man nodded, leaving the teen's room. Walking over, Naruto picked up the letter, opened it carefully and pulled out the contents. "Naruto, congratulations on making it into Magic Knights. I knew that you would make it in without a doubt, though I'm a little surprised at your squad choice. The Black Bulls? Yami is a very good man, so I can't nag you too much on the choice. I'm sure you'll rise through the ranks rather quickly. I've also heard about your agreement to train with Fuegoleon, which I must say was a rather bold action. I would like to offer you further training, or at least a chance to chat and catch up as you grow into a fine young man. From my knowledge, the best days for this would be Wednesday when you're not on missions. If you accept, just write back, and I hope to hear more about you as you grow into a fine young man. Good luck Naruto, this is just your first step. Julius-sensei." Naruto smiled as he set the letter down on his desk before flopping back onto his bed, sleep consuming him as soon as he let his head hit the bed. "Oi Finneral, I need you for a moment," Yami said, walking into the room of his wheels, who groaned slightly at being woken up from his slumber. "Hi Yami Taicho." Finneral finally got out as he looked at the captain of their squad. "Take me to the Wizard King's tower," he told the man, who sighed knowing he had a long trip ahead of him, but nonetheless opened a portal as the two men stepped through, appearing just outside a rather large tower. "Wait here," Yami said as he took another drag from his cigarette before he pushed inside the tower, heading for the Wizard King's office. It didn't take the man long to arrive as he pushed inside to see Julius working hard on paperwork as normal. "Oh Yami-kun, I'm rather surprised to see you here," Julius said, offering a kind smile that Yami had grown accustomed to. "Oi old man, I need to know something about one of my new recruits," Yami said, deciding not to beat around the bush. "You're going to have to be more specific. I'm rather surprised you chose 3, that's a rather high number for you," Julius said with a smile as he pushed the paperwork he was working on forward. Yami simply sighed as he took another drag on his cigarette. "Naruto? He's almost their spitting image, and his ki is rather similar. Hell, now that I think about it, she had a similar magic type in grimoire," Yami said as Julius frowned, a serious expression forming on his face as he sighed. "I should have known you of all people would figure it out already," he said as he reached into his desk, pulling out a scroll which he set on his desk, sliding it to the man. Looking at it for a moment, he picked it up as scanned through the contents, his eyes widening for a moment as he nearly dropped his cigarette. "Damn Julius, that's a lot to drop on me all at once. When are you going to tell the kid? Don't you think he deserves to know?" Yami asked, causing Julius to nod. "Yeah, I will soon have his parents kill me if I don't tell him sooner," Julius said with a nonchalant laugh as he took the scroll back, looking at it one more time. The top read a simple word: Uzumaki. The 4th and almost extinct royal family save for one surviving member. The scroll also had 2 faces on it. One looked like an older Naruto almost, as it was a man with blonde, nearly blonde hair and the same blue eyes as Naruto sans the whisker marks. He also had bangs framing his face with his hair going down to his shoulders. The second photo was that of a rather beautiful woman with long red hair and purple eyes. "Oh, I should let you know I'll be training Naruto on Wednesdays. It's the least I can do for being a horrible godfather," Julius said with a sad smile. "Gotcha. Alright, I'm off," Yami said with a lazy wave as he left the Wizard King's office, returning to headquarters with a rather large headache. "I'm sorry Naruto, I'll tell you everything soon," Julius said, looking out the large windows before him as the images of 2 people flashed before his eyes, a sad smile pulling at his lips for a moment. Naruto had been working himself into the ground for almost a week every day and then repeating the process. Training with Fuegoleon and Julius was no joke, with Julius having kicked his training up a notch. He had also met Leopold, the younger brother of Fuegoleon and a magic knight of the Crimson Lions. Naruto let a pained smile grace his face as he remembered his first meeting with Leopold. Naruto stood before the palace that housed the Crimson Lions, scratching his whiskered cheek as he looked upon the large structure. He felt out of place. Almost everyone there were dressed in rather nice clothing, obviously coming from a place of wealth. There was also no love for the robes he wore, as every time a member of the squad looked at him they offered a kind smile or at least a respectful nod till they saw the color and symbol on the robe. Then it was just disdain, but Naruto was growing used to it as a member of the Black Bulls. It seemed everywhere he went this was the reaction he received for belonging to one of the worst Magic Knight squads. But instead of deterring the boy, it built his resolve to better the name of his squad and still rise to the top. Finally, after standing around for a while, he saw Fuegoleon coming out of the palace with another person walking in step behind him. He was a young teen around Naruto's age. The teen was of an average height with long, messy vermilion hair. He kept a third of his hair in a braid while leaving the rest in a messy, spiky hairstyle. He had some red markings around his turquoise eyes. The teen wore a set of clothes that clearly shows his nobility. He sported a white tunic under a dark blue shirt with a high collar, which had gold trimming. He also wore a red sash that holds the shirt together. At the bottom, he wore white pants that extend slightly below his knees and a pair of dark blue shoes. On top of everything, he wore a long red robe as well as the squad robes of the Crimson Knights. "Hello Naruto-kun, I hope you found our home well." Fuegoleon spoke up as he got closer to the teen, who nodded. "This is my younger brother Leopold the First. Figured you wouldn't mind having a training partner." "Don't mind it at all, I'm Naruto," he said to Leopold, offering out his hand. Leopold looked at the hand for a moment before he showed off a large grin, shaking the teen's hand. "Nice to meet you Naruto. I'm Leopold Vermilion." They shook hands as a friendship was seemingly born in that moment. Leopold wasn't like many of the royals he had run into before, in which he didn't look down on you for your status. It was a nice breath of fresh air, though now that he thought about it, Julius Sensei didn't either, nor did Fuegoleon. Currently the teen was laying in bed enjoying his morning off, though he could hear Estes' yells as he worked throughout the base. There was a knock on the door, forcing Naruto to sit up. "It's open," Naruto called as Yami opened the door, a serious look on his face. "Oi brat, I need you to come with me for a moment," Yami said with a tone that left no room for argument. Shrugging, Naruto threw his legs off his bed, quickly putting on an old pair of boots. Standing up, Naruto followed Yami, who walked in silence. "Hey brat, do you ever remember anything about your parents?" Yami asked, looking at the teen, who tilted his head in thought. He hadn't thought much of his parents. He figured they hadn't wanted him for whatever reason. Why else would he be orphaned? "No, not really," Naruto said, looking at Yami, who frowned and nodded, looking forward again. That was rather odd in Naruto's mind. Why would Yami ask about his parents? For all he knew, they were nobodies, not warranting the question like that. After all, he didn't think Yami ever asked about Estes' parents. "You'll find out why I asked in a moment," Yami said to Naruto, as if reading his mind. Opening a door, they found themselves in an office with the back of Julius looking out a window. "Julius Sensei?" Naruto asked, even more confused as to why the man was there. Perhaps it was because he was royalty and he needed to discuss their training regime with him and Yami? "Sensei? So you've really been training the brat?" Yami said with a laugh, causing Julius's normally proud shoulders to drop a little bit at the laugh of the captain. "Yes, I have, Yami," he said, turning around looking at Naruto with a rather happy-looking smile. "It's good to see you again, Naruto. I hope you're rested up," he said before his face slowly morphed into a serious one as Yami took a seat at the desk, motioning for Naruto to do the same on the opposite side. "So what's up?" he asked. "This doesn't seem like your average house call." "That's because it's not, Naruto-kun," Julius said as his hands reached into his robes, pulling out a scroll which he unfurled. "Naruto, have you ever heard of the Uzumaki family?" Naruto put a finger to his cheek as he thought about it for a moment. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Naruto couldn't place his finger on it. "Not really," he told his sensei after some deliberation of why it sounded familiar. "Well, to put it simply, the Uzumaki family once was one of the 4 royal families. The Uzumaki, Kira, Vermilion and Silva families were the 4 branches of royalty. However, the Uzumaki were feared for their magic prowess, longevity and advanced healing ability. Some of the few Uzumaki I met had some of the thickest and most potent magic I ever felt. Julius said with a sad smile as if remembering a fond but distant memory. They were also feared on the battlefield. Due to this the family began to die out due to them constantly being used on the front lines. I don't think I've ever told you this, Naruto-kun, but I'm the Wizard King. Julius told Naruto's eyes, who widened slightly. Wait, you're the Wizard King and yet you've been training me? Naruto asked the wheels to turn in his head. And what's with the importance of the Uzumaki? Naruto asked. I'm getting there, Julius said, holding up his hand to stop any more questions. I'm the 28th Wizard King and I was great friends with the 27th Wizard King. His dream was always to be the Wizard King, something he achieved after lots of hard work and proving himself to the kingdom. We came up together in the same squad, the Grey Deer. He became the captain of a now-gone squad and then the Magic King. Julius continued, a look of longing on his face as reminisced on different times. Anyways, his name was Minato Namikaze and he married a wonderful woman named Kushina Uzumaki, the last true-born Uzumaki. When they found out they were pregnant they were so happy, however the day of birth there were some complications. The whole family was killed. Julius, a frown formed on his face as he looked out the window with Yami taking a tired drag on his cigarette. Naruto looked at the two. There had to be a reason for this story, he just hadn't figured out why yet. It was said a demon or devil attacked, killing Kushina and their just-born baby. Minato defeated the demon, however, at the cost of his life. It was a sad day for the kingdom, Yami said as he finished his cigarette, flipping the stub into an ashtray. Like I said, we thought the whole family had died. Till I found you. Naruto was startled as an intense gaze was leveled on him and in an instant he realized where this was going. When I first found you I had my doubts. You looked like a mix of the two, but it couldn't be possible, right? But your magic type is so similar to Kushina's, and the fact you have a second grimoire contained within your own, much like Kushina. Julius said as Naruto began to hyperventilate. I'm so sorry, Naruto. If I would have known sooner I would have taken care of you. I am a terrible godfather, Julius shouted as he fell to his hands and knees, his head bowed low with tears barely contained at his failure. Naruto looked at the man who he had come to see as his sensei, tears barely contained on his own face. You're my godfather? Naruto asked in shock. Julius simply nodded, barely trusting his own voice in the moment. Were my parents excited to have me? Naruto asked, barely above a whisper. They were, Naruto. There was a shine constantly around the two that grew brighter and brighter as the time came closer. Yami finally spoke up in a soft voice, his usual gruffness gone. You were wanted, Naruto. They couldn't wait for you to be born so they could finally meet you. Julius finally spoke slowly, pushing himself up as the tears began to fully fall down Naruto's face. Julius walked over, placing a gentle hand on Naruto's shoulder, only to stumble backwards as Naruto crashed into the man, hugging him tightly as the boy sobbed freely. Julius was shocked by the action, expecting hate and anger from the teen. He stood there in confusion before his mind clicked. There, Naruto-kun, Julius said, wrapping his arms around the teen, his own tears falling silently as he comforted the young mage. Yami looked away from the scene, lighting another cigarette as he reminisced about Minato and Kushina. Once Naruto had finally calmed down, he handed Naruto a scroll. What's this? Naruto asked as he wiped his eyes, though they remained red and puffy. On the outside of the scroll it read Uzumaki, causing the teen to look up at the man. While the size of the house of Uzumaki fell, its fortune and power hasn't, he said, motioning for Naruto to open the scroll. Naruto did so, being greeted by three pictures. The first was that of a blonde-haired man with blue eyes who had a jovial smile. The second was that of a rather beautiful red-haired woman with vibrant purple eyes who held a fire within them, however she had a small smile that was so warm and inviting. Those were your parents, Julius told Naruto as he looked at the last picture. It was that of a heavily pregnant Kushina being held by Minato, with a young Julius clasping onto the man's shoulder happily. This only set off more tears, which Naruto quickly wiped away as he looked at the picture for a while. You're the last of the Uzumaki now, Naruto, which means you have access to all its funds and property as well as businesses. After you turn 18, for now I manage it, but I'll start sending you a monthly stipend from the accounts, Julius told Naruto as he unfurrowed the scroll further, his eyes widening as he looked at Julius. This can't be true. This is how much is in them? Naruto asked in shock. It was more money than the teen had ever seen, let alone knew what to do with. Julius nodded nonchalantly as Yami walked over, looking at the scroll, letting out a loud whistle. Quite the fortune you got there now, brat. Yami said as Julius chuckled weakly. I'm sure it's only grown, but yes, that fortune will someday all be yours. Also, you can no longer just go by Naruto, you are now Naruto Uzumaki. Julius told the mage, who gained a happy smile. He had a last name now. There's one last piece of business I need to inform you of. Julius said with a sigh. He wasn't quite sure how Naruto would react, but he needed to know. Yes, Julius-sensei? Naruto asked as Julius whispered into Yami's ear. The man looked at his senior for confirmation, causing the older man to nod. Yami began to chuckle before he began to bellow in laughter. That doesn't bode well, Naruto said with a sweat drop forming on his head as he looked at his captain. Well, seeing as you are the last Uzumaki, the king, much to the displeasure of Kushina, made it so that you would be betrothed to the second-born daughter of the House of Silva and a girl of House Vermilion. Which means you are betrothed to Noelle Silva and Mimosa Vermilion. Julius finished, causing Naruto's jaw to drop as he began to nervously laugh. You're pulling my leg, right, Julius-sensei? That's a joke, right? Naruto asked as Julius shook his head. No. I'm to be married to not one but two girls? Both of which I don't really know. Naruto asked, getting an affirmative yes. Naruto sat there unmoving, saying absolutely nothing. I think you broke him, Julius. Yami said after finally containing his laughter, as the emotional weight of everything that Naruto had learned that day had finally made him pass him out. I'll take care of him, Yami said as he picked up Naruto gently as Julius offered a kind smile. Take care of him when I can't, Julius said as he left, just catching Yami's nod. I suppose it's almost time for your first mission, Yami said, looking at Naruto before quickly taking him to his room and laying him down in the bed. Oi Gaki. Naruto could hear Yami from besides his bed, stirring him from the deep slumber. Yami? Naruto asked, rubbing his eyes of their grogginess, and looking to the right he saw the large man smoking a cigarette as usual. I have a mission for you newbies, Yami told the boy, who instantly was awake with a large grin on his face. Really? He shouted, shooting up and standing before Yami, who nodded. Really, you three will be heading with Magna to take care of some boars. They're waiting for you outside, so I suggest getting a move on. Naruto grinned as he gave Yami a thumbs up. He grabbed his broom and ran out of his room, heading downstairs. He arrived rather quickly to see Magna, Noelle and Asta standing around. Finally decided to join us, huh? Magna said rather annoyedly. HMPH, leave it to a peasant to be late, Noelle said, and everything came rushing back to him about their situation. Fighting back a blush, Naruto chuckled, simply barely able to look at Noelle. Sorry, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. Anyways, let's get going, Naruto said, getting onto his broom before looking at Asta. Wait, you can't fly, can you? Naruto asked with a deadpan. Nope, Asta shouted simply. I can't either, Noelle said, causing Magna to sigh. I guess we'll have to split them up, Naruto. I'll take the shrimp, Magna told Naruto, who tensed for a second before he shrugged. Okay, hope on Noelle, Naruto told the girl, moving up on the broom. The girl bit back a blush as she sat down on the broom behind the boy, and Asta sat down on Magna's rather large broom. Yosh, off we go, Magna shouted as they took off, flying over the woods, not noticing Yami and Julius's watchful eyes. Flying over the forest, Naruto felt Noelle's hands grip onto his shoulders to keep herself stable on his broom. Hey Noelle, have you ever heard of the Uzumaki? Naruto asked, turning his head to see her reaction to the name. Yes, however from my knowledge they are all dead, Noelle said, confused on what brought up the clan. My mother was a close friend with one of them. Or so I've heard from my brothers and sister, she said, her voice growing quiet when thinking about them. Ah, I see, Naruto said. He debated his next words, looking back at the girl, his shoulders dropped slightly. There's a chance I'm an Uzumaki. Wait, what? Are you serious? Noelle asked, shocked at the revelation. Naruto looked at her and nodded. Yup, that's what Yami Taicho told me. I'm Naruto Uzumaki now, he said with a warm smile as Noelle's face portrayed the shock she was feeling at that moment. This teen was the last of the Uzumaki, a once thought extinct family and those blessed by mana. Wow. Noelle stammered out, not quite sure how to articulate her words on the matter. though it seemed she could no longer call him a peasant or insect ever again. Oi, we're almost there. Manga shouted as they began to descend down into the forest. There should be a large pack of boars close by. Our mission is to get rid of them for the town. Magna explained as Asta pulled out his sword, quickly placing it on his shoulder. Yosh, Asta said as he led the group through the woods. Burrow. They heard next to them and suddenly there was a boar stumbling out of the woods with patches of fire on it. The thing about the boar was that it was huge, towering over all the teens. I think you can handle this one, Asta. Naruto said with a deadpan, looking at the large beast as Asta paled, looking at the teen he had grown up with. Why me? Asta shouted in shock as everyone hid behind him. Because you were so gung-ho about taking on these beasts. Naruto said, getting an affirmative nod from Noel. Brrrgh. They heard, drawing their attention back to the boar which began to charge Asta. Ah! He screamed as he swung his sword down, hitting the beast straight in the head, causing it to fall down unconscious. That wasn't too bad, right? Asta said, turning towards them. However, he tensed up as snorts could be heard behind him. Suddenly stomping could be heard and 3 more boars came out of the foliage. Huh, would you look at that? Naruto shouted as Asta's face paled once more. I guess I could help, he said, pulling out his grimoire. Flipping through the pages, Naruto ignored the screams of Asta, who shouted for help. He flipped from spell to spell, shaking his head at each one. I think this one will do, Naruto said as he held his hand out, a mirthful smirk on his face as he watched Asta pranced around trying to get away from the boars. Naruto, please help, Asta shouted, batting away the tusk of a boar that was about to impale him. Yeah, hold on, he said, lining up his shot. Hellfire magic. Hellfire barrage, he shouted as 3 balls of flames shot out from his hand, expanding as they flew towards the beasts and exploding. When the flames died down at Naruto's willed, all that was left was the crisp and well-cooked bodies. Thank you, Naruto, Asta breathed out as Naruto snorted. I think you thanked me too soon, Asta, Naruto said simply as 5 boars walked out of the forest, all looking angrily at their fallen brothers. Naruto, Asta shouted, causing the birds to fly away from the spot in the forest, and the boars all charged Asta, only for a rather large dark red fireball to fly past him, smacking down right in the middle of the large group of boars. Geez, Naruto, that was a little overkill. But I guess the job's done anyways, let's get these to the town. Magna spoke up as the charred remains of the boars reappeared, everyone looking on in awe at the destructive power of the magic Naruto could use. If anything, the village will at least get a meal out of this, Naruto said with a large grin, which everyone returned. Asta picked up 4 boar, Magna picked up 5 and Naruto got the rest. Noel said it was below royalty, which caused Naruto to roll his eyes. Your magic is really intense, Naruto, Magna complimented as they walked through the forest. Sometimes it's too intense. I gotta always remember to cut off the mana if I don't want it to keep burning, Naruto said, feeling the urge to rub the back of his head if it wasn't for the boars he was carrying. Coming out of the forest, Naruto felt something was off, though he couldn't quite place his finger on it. Here we go. This is a cliff that overlooks the... Magna trailed off as they came to the cliffside. There was no village, just a dome of fog with a bridge leading to it. That's a lot of mana, Naruto said with a frown, staring at the fog before them. It was obviously an unnatural fog, but none of the Black Bull members present were aware of what could be the cause. Come on, let's go, Magna shouted, discarding the boars and running down the hill, reaching the road with everyone else hot on his heel. They made it across the bridge and to the barrier of fog without any attacks or difficulty, which confused Naruto. Whatever is causing this isn't expecting reinforcements to this town. Noel vocalized Naruto's thoughts as they slowly entered the fog, and suddenly they had no sense of direction, confusing the teens. Oi, Asta, this fog is made of mana, you should be able to cut through it, right? Naruto shouted. Oh yeah, he heard Asta shout out, and he could hear the grimoire open and a few slashes of the sword, and they saw each other once more. Magna was making a visible effort to judge where they were in the town exactly. Alright, let's head to the left, he shouted, and Asta led the way, cutting through the fog, giving them a path with Magna shouting directions as they made their way towards the main square. Before they knew it, the fog dissipated, showing a large group of civilians huddled together with one man laying before them. Old man, Magna shouted and started to run forward, only for Naruto to grab him. Hey, what's the deal? It's a trap, that's the deal, Naruto said as Magna looked above the civilians, seeing a large amount of ice spikes aimed at every single civilian in the square. You've thrown off my time. No matter, I'll make it up. A voice said as the fog weakened more to show a group of 4 robed figures, with the leader being the only one to show his face. Just who the hell are you? Magna shouted with a glare, looking at the man who simply stared impassively at the group of knights. That doesn't matter, was all the man said as he wove his hand downwards and the spikes began to fall. Magna moved quickly, pulling out a bat of fire from his grimoire and shooting off a couple of fireballs that destroyed the spikes protecting the civilians. Moving quickly, the knights ran in between the enemy and the civilians in a protective manner. I will tolerate no further delays, he said, snapping his fingers, and the 4 mages pointed their hands outward, shooting off a multitude of spikes. Shit, we gotta deal with those. Magna shouted as Asta began to quickly swing his sword, destroying as many spikes as he could, with Magna shooting fireballs towards the spikes, destroying what he could as well. Naruto stood at the ready with Noel behind him, prepared to finish off the spikes that made it through. There's too many, Asta shouted as a wall of flame shot up behind the mages, melting the handful of spikes that made it past the other Black Bulls. Good work, Naruto. Yeah, now keep foe, Asta. Naruto shouted as a spike hit Asta in the shoulder and leg, while Magna received a spike to his side. You bastard. Magna grounded out, holding his side, trying to keep the blood from seeping out. Asta seemed out for the count, and so did Magna. Naruto cursed as he looked at the barrier of flames protecting the civilians. Noel, I need you to protect the civilians, Naruto said, looking at the silver-haired girl who snapped out of her daze, looking at the teen. What? But I can't control my magic, she shouted in shock at the request. Naruto simply smiled as he started to let the barrier fall slightly, showing the scared civilians who looked at the knights for protection. I know you can do it, Noel, I believe in you. We all believe in you, he said, giving a thumbs up as he began to walk forward towards the rogue mages who looked at him nervously. What is this mana level? It's massive, shouted one of the men, and in his fear he shot a spike directly towards Naruto's heart. Feeling the mana shoot towards him, Naruto looked back forward, his normally soft eyes hardening as he pointed his hand forward, shooting a small ball of fire from his palm which melted the spike. The ball didn't simply stop there, it shot forward with some steam, hitting the mage in the hands, causing him to scream as he felt his hands begin to burn. Seeing the man's clothes begin to alight, Naruto let his mana leave the flames, stopping the burning. However, the man's hands were already of no use. I'm not done yet, Asta said, pushing himself up, gripping his sword tightly as he stood beside Naruto, a determined look in his eyes as if he couldn't give up. Looking behind him, he saw spikes begin to form over the civilians, causing him to curse. However, Noel moved quickly, a dome of water forming over them all. That's the way, Noel, he said with a soft smile before looking back at the mages before him. Let's go, Asta, Naruto shouted. Yosh, he shouted, getting in a stance, causing the cloaked men to step back before he shot forward, aiming towards the leader. Take care of them, the leader shouted as Asta flew towards him. Spikes began to form, however it was futile as Naruto launched a barrage of flames towards the men, bowling into them and sending them flying. The man cursed as he began to form his own spike. The move came too late as Asta chopped through the spike, his sword hitting the man straight in the chest before he was sent flying as well. Good work, guys, Magna said weakly, the blood seeping from his side as the fog fully started to dissipate. Naruto grinned as he walked over to the knockout men, quickly tying them up. Call for some backup, Naruto shouted towards the civilians as the barrier dropped. The civilians moved quickly to assess the damage as well as calling the knight headquarters. Within a few hours, a small squad of medics and police-style knights Magna was healed rather quickly. The spike had luckily missed any major spots. Let's give him some space, Naruto said to Noel and Asta as he watched him walk over to the grave they had made for the village leader. Out of nowhere there was movement in Asta's shirt, and one of the zero magic birds came out of it and flew away. What the hell? How do they keep finding you? Naruto asked, looking at the teen confused, who simply shrugged. Shit, no. Shouting at the captain of the reinforcements, their attention immediately went towards the prisoners who were covered in ice. You have to be kidding me. Naruto groaned out. Of course they would rather kill themselves than give up any information. They should have expected something like that, but it seemed that in their hubris they had let the enemies slip through their fingers. I mean, at least we survived our first fight, right? Noelle said to no one in particular. After another hour of answering questions about what little information they had received, they were giving the all-clear to leave. The bird returned at this moment, pecking Asta in the head much to his chagrin, and dropped a weird stone in his hand. Taking off on their brooms once more, the seating arrangements remained the same. The return trip was rather silent as everyone was tired from combat they had just gone through, and the wind made it hard to talk between brooms anyways. However, this was interrupted on Naruto's broom when Noelle spoke up. "So you're really an Uzumaki? When are you going to announce it? Surely you plan on announcing your heritage?" Noelle asked Naruto, who simply contemplated the question, not quite sure how to answer it, having barely thought about it. "You know, I'm honestly not sure yet. I know at some point I have to, but after being an orphan for so long it's weird knowing I have a family, ya know? I just want to settle into being Naruto Uzumaki first before I fully accept my role as the head of the Uzumaki." Naruto said with a soft smile, letting it slip he was the current head of the family. "Wait, you're the head of the Uzumaki? I know you're the only one left, but typically you wouldn't be made head of them unless you were the son of the previous. Wait, hold on, you're the son of the previous head of the Uzumaki, that means you're the son of..." Noelle was cut off by Naruto before her voice rose to high and alerted their traveling companions. "Yes, I'm the son of Minato Uzumaki, the previous Wizard King, and Kushina Uzumaki, the previous head of the Uzumaki," Naruto said, causing the girls' eyes to widen at the implications. "When you announce your heritage you'll be one of the strongest people politically in the nation," she whispered in shock, looking at the teen in awe. "I know, I already had this explained to me, but please don't treat me any different. I'm still just Naruto. No matter what, I'll still be the same as always," he said with a soft smile, causing Noelle to hold a new amount of respect for the boy. "I should probably tell Mimosa about this as well." "Wait, Mimosa Vermilion?" Noelle asked, looking at the boy expectantly. "Yes? Wait, don't answer that. She is a royal after all," Naruto said with a shake of his head, not surprised that the two knew each other. "Our mothers were close friends from what I heard. We could have been cousins-in-law actually if her uncle hadn't passed away at the same time as your father," Noelle told the boy, who looked at the girl. "From what you've heard?" he asked, confused. "My mother passed away after I was born. I've just heard stories about her from Mimosa's mom," she told the boy, who nodded. "I see." He decided rather smartly not to push the topic any further, knowing it was more than likely a touchy one for the girl. Before they knew it, they were finally back at the Black Bull's hideout, where they were greeted with a cheer. "You dumbasses did do pretty good, you even earned a star," Yami told them, holding up a star before them as the rookies looked at it confused. "A star is used to denote a job well done," Finneral explained for them. "Ooh, I see," Asta shouted, watching as the star moved upwards towards a board where a bunch of black stars sat. When it landed, the star disappeared. "We now have -50, well done," Yami said with pride as the rookies looked at the board in shock. "What?" Asta shouted, his jaw having dropped. "We're officially only 100 behind the Golden Dawn as well," Yami announced to a cheer from everyone else. "Only 100? We can make that up," Asta shouted with a grin, suddenly thinking about catching up to the squad that Yuno had decided to join. "That's the spirit," Finneral shouted with a nod. "Also, monthly pay arrived, so here you guys go," Yami said, handing everyone bags of money as Naruto and Asta looked into his stars forming in Asta's eyes. "This is more money than I've ever seen," he shouted, looking at Noelle, who simply looked at the bag in contempt. "You know, little boys, why don't we go on a shopping trip tomorrow in the city? Maybe get some new clothes, and Miss Noelle, we can get something to help control your magic," the voice of Vanessa said from behind the two boys as she wrapped her slender arms around them. "You sure?" Naruto stuttered out, missing the look of jealousy to pass before Noelle's eyes for just a moment. The night was rather rowdy as the squad celebrated their only star. By the early hours of the morning, Naruto finally got to writing a letter to Mimosa. Reading it one more time, Naruto rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "Dear Mimosa, I apologize for not writing back sooner, but I was sent on my first mission and a lot happened in between that and the letter you sent. But to answer your questions, yes, I am doing well. The Black Bulls are a rather interesting bunch I've learned over the past couple of days, but I've come to feel a deep bond with them all. Our first mission went well actually. We gained our first stars, me, Noelle, and Asta, so look out world, the Black Bulls have -50 now. I wish that was a joke. Anyways, I'm finding it hard to write the right words here, so I'm glad I'm doing this over a letter. I suppose it's best to just come out with it. I am more than just Naruto. I am Naruto Uzumaki, soon to be head of the Uzumaki family. You and Noel and a few others I'm not at liberty to talk about, I think. No. I want this to remain a secret for now, but for some reason I thought you should know. I'm heading into a castle town nearby to buy some new clothes. I think my wardrobe could use a makeover, seeing as I'm not that country bumpkin anymore. Hope to hear from you soon. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, satisfied with the letter, lay down quickly, letting sleep embrace him rather quickly. Morning came far too soon for his liking. As he sat up putting the letter in an envelope, he gave it to the courier owl with the rest of the mail and moved quickly to take a bath. The water was warm and felt nice on his skin, allowing him to relax from the first taste of combat he had received. Definitely need new clothes, Naruto said with a deadpan, looking at his old clothes, which were riddled with patch jobs and lines of thread. A lot of the color had faded from them. His boots were also worn down, barely held together along the seams. Sighing, Naruto slipped on his clothes, heading to the main hall where everyone was waiting for him. Alright, everyone's here, let's go, Finneral said as a portal opened, allowing everyone to walk through. The town was bustling with people as the group minus Finneral, who left rather quickly to begin flirting with girls, made their way through the crowds. They also spotted other members of the squad going about their business, but they didn't seem to stop anywhere. Where are we going exactly, Vanessa? Naruto asked, noticing they had passed a lot of weapons and clothes shops already. You'll see, was all she said with a coy smile. They arrived at a back alley which was a dead end, causing everyone to look at Vanessa with a deadpan. A lot to see here, Noelle remarked, the smile never leaving Vanessa's face as she walked through the wall, to everyone's shock. Poking her head out, she giggled at everyone's faces. Well, what are you waiting for? Come on in, she said as everyone looked at each other before walking in to see a bazaar filled with a multitude of different vendors. Welcome to one of the black markets of the Clover Kingdom, Vanessa said as they walked past all the different shops. This is a place for only wizards, as most of the items are magical in nature and most commoners can't handle the mana needs. Here's a nice little clothing shop I like, Vanessa said, pointing towards a storefront. Naruto simply shrugged, walking inside. We'll meet back here soon, Vanessa said, allowing Naruto to walk into the store, which proved to be massive. Walking through it, Naruto went from rack to rack looking at all the clothing items as an older woman sat at the counter reading a magazine. Need any help, young man? The lady asked without looking up. Naruto continued to stare as the long-sleeve shirt before him. Not really? I think I can handle it, he said with a light smile. Finally picking out some clothes, Naruto walked into the changing room, trying out the clothing. The first outfit was a pair of black pants with a burnt orange seam. He wore an orange long-sleeved shirt with a red vest and a black jacket. To finish off the ensemble was a long red cape. Naruto looked at himself before shaking his head. Moving on, he kept the black pants as he already liked them and had a few pairs. He tried on a black shirt with a burnt orange vest and the jacket, however he felt he looked too much like a Halloween character. Moving on, he tried on a white shirt with the red vest and jacket, and finally a white robe and his squad cloak. Naruto looked himself over in thought before finding himself liking the ensemble. Walking out of the changing room, Naruto grabbed 4 of the shirts and pants, 2 of the jacket and vest as well as the robe, and walked over to the counter, setting it down before looking at his boots once again. Just one moment please. Wait, do you think you could do some embroidering? Naruto asked as the old woman looked at the young man and she looked like she had seen a ghost. Composing herself, she gave a sweet smile and nodded. Of course, young man, just give me a design and let me know where you want it, she said as thread began to appear, controlled by her magic. Naruto simply pulled out the symbol of the Uzumaki and placed it in the middle of his back on the cloak. Not a problem, young man. Anything else? She asked Naruto, who thought about the outfit before him for a moment. Could I dark red flames at the bottom of the cloak? And could I get a large 9 on the back of the vests in white? He finished as the lady nodded. Yes, just give me a few moments, she said as Naruto walked over to the boots, which were positioned in front of the window to the outside. Naruto barely saw Asta chasing someone and shrugged, not really caring. Looking through the boots, Naruto hummed and thought about what would go well with his outfit. Naruto finally settled on a pair of brown boots that went up to the middle of his calves and grabbed 2 pairs. Walking back up to the counter, the older lady was just finishing up the embroidering. May I ask for 1 full set left out so I can change into it? Naruto asked just before she packed everything into a large bundle. The old lady simply smiled and nodded, setting aside a full set. Naruto reached into his pocket pulling out his money pouch, however the old lady's hands suddenly grabbed his hand. "Young man, I feel no need to make you pay. Consider this a gift for a revival of the Uzumaki," she said, causing Naruto's head to shoot up in shock. "Wait, how did you know I'm an Uzumaki?" he asked, as he had figured that not many knew of the symbol of the Uzumaki outside of a royal setting. He cursed his stupidity for not expecting it to be known outside the capital. "You're the spitting image of your father, whom I used to be the personal tailor for. We had all thought your family died out that cruel day, and I'm shocked to see you alive now, but it brings me so much joy. Please, for my sake, allow an old woman to give you this favor," she said, causing Naruto to swallow a lump that had formed in his stomach and simply nod, unable to express the joy her act of kindness had brought. "Thank you so much," he said, bowing lowly as he took the bundle and set of clothing. "So much like your father," the old lady said joyfully as she watched the young man enter the dress room and quickly excitedly dressed in his new outfit. Naruto did a twirl, enjoying the way the cloak flowed around him, swishing in the wind. "Please return for any alterations, fixes or replacements as need be," the old woman said with a bow, which Naruto returned as he began to exit the shop. "Of course, as long as you tell me about my father and mother," Naruto said with a happy smile and wave as he walked outside. She watched as the young man talked with members of his squad before leaving. "I must alert the others that the Uzumaki have returned and we have a young master," she said, standing up when a flash of light appeared in the store, shocking the woman. "No need, Petra," Julius' voice said as the old lady stared at the man in shock, bowing low in respect for the Wizard King. "Julius-sama," she said in shock as the man offered a simple smile. "I have already begun to alert the old servants of the Uzumaki household, and they are currently hard at work preparing the manor for Naruto's return. You were actually the last person I needed to visit. For now I'm sure Naruto will return as need be. I will alert you when the time is finally upon us for the return of the Uzumaki," Julius explained to the woman, who grew a rather large smile. "I see his godfather is hard at work," she said with a fond smile, which Julius returned. Back with Naruto. Having just walked out of the store, he was quickly joined by everyone else. "Interesting outfit choice, Naruto-kun, it makes you look rather dashing," Vanessa remarked, looking him up and down, giving a nod of acceptance. "It looks rather nice," Noelle said, not used to complimenting people. "Don't you think about the robes rather much?" Asta asked as they began to exit the market. Naruto for his part simply shrugged. "I don't know why, I just felt it called to me is all," he said with a smile as they left the market, throwing his old worn-out clothes into a garbage bin. "What did you get, Noelle?" Naruto asked, looking at his fellow royal, who showed a wand. "Just this, it should help me control my magic," she explained. Naruto looked at Asta, who didn't seem to be holding anything new. "I didn't get anything," Asta said with a shrug, already seeing the question forming in Naruto's head. "Gotcha, not even new clothing?" he asked, noticing Asta's clothes looked rather worn as well. "Nah, I'll get replacements soon," he said with a simple shrug as the large group made their way back to the squad's hideout, making small talk, not noticing the watchful eyes of Julius.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.